So I just spoke to Father Sarat and to Kabir, and Brigadier Ranjan is having trouble launching the app on his computer, but and see if we can get on. Other two will join us presently. So if you like, you can start, Dr.
Yeah. Welcome to Dr. TSPR show. This is Dr. Tangella Shiva Prasad Reddy alias Dr. TSPR. Namaste, Adab, hello, and a warm welcome to the wonderful guest from Lanka, which is in crisis. And believe me, as we celebrate the father of Constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's Jayanti, and who is the one who has given us this Constitution so that people have every right to enjoy their life, and we ourselves are Constitution, so that people participatory constitutional democracy is the symbol of the growth of this great country alike, and our neighbors too. We wish that they also go through the same. So remembering Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, at the same time we are celebrating Mahavir Jayanti too, and the new year, the Tamil New Year, Baisakhi in the north, and tomorrow we'll be celebrating Malayali New Year too. So everything is happening, and do not forget, I am being reminded in the afternoon that this is Lanka's New Year Day too. So my wishes and greetings to all Lankans and to all those in India who have been celebrating their New Year. On this eve, while we celebrate the New Year, how is that we are forgotten that we are people, and we should have democracy wherein people should be the ones who should be ruling themselves through the constitutional property called elections, and after which you have a party based government in power to take care of your welfare as well as your development. That should be in a transparent and accountable way. But of late, just not Lanka, I've been given the list of the countries: Chile, Nepal, Somalia. They send me big videos when I announce this program. With due respects to you all, I cannot club all these things together because I've not invited you. It is Lanka affair. What is happening in Lanka? Why is Lanka in crisis? What is the way forward? Let me show you some glimpses of it. Before that, let us just introduce our guest to the world now. So kindly, all my dear good friends from Lanka, introduce yourself, your name, what is that you do, which organization you represent, and subsequently we shall start. Yes, sir, please. One at a time, sir. You can start, Gamika Gunawardhana.
Hello, good evening. I'm Gamika Gunawardhana. My background is I've been in the media, publishing, event management industry. I had a company in England that specialized in marketing the commercial rights of international sports events. And I worked for several large media companies in London that organized international trade conferences and international trade exhibitions. So that gave me the opportunity to work in almost every industry and to do business with all the major corporations pretty much in the entire world. So I have a good understanding of the business culture of various countries and how they function. And later on, I went on to start a company that specializes in marketing the commercial rights of sports events. Very briefly, if you watch an international event on TV, it will be a company like ours that would sell the license, broadcast that event in your country. And soon after that, I returned back to Sri Lanka about 17 years ago. And since I've returned for the last 16, 17 years, I've mostly been engaged in learning about agriculture, organic agriculture, indigenous medicine, and also I've been doing a lot of research on the entire global system, on how the global system functions, and all the different, all the key players that influences the functioning of it, as in in various industries, banking, defense,
Fine.
pharmaceutical, you name it.
Yep, that's great.
So it gave me the time, because I didn't have to work for the last 17 years. It gave me the time to go into in-depth research into all various industries and how all these corporations are interlinked, and
Yep,
how the banking mafia pretty much controls the entire world.
that's fun,
Now,
wonderful. I think
that also gave me.
yeah, please. I think you're not done. Please go ahead. Go ahead,
Yeah.
sir.
So that gave me some motivation and a lot of interest in researching this whole pandemic scenario, and I got to the bottom of the cause of it and the reason for it, and how the World Economic Forum is a principal.
Yes, that will come, sir. I'll
player
come to
in
you.
the whole-
I'll
whole
come to
thing.
you, Gunawardhanaji. But love to have you because you have so many traits, and I hope this discussion will expose first in context to Sri Lanka very much. I am hopeful you had wonderful experiences to go with your background. I think that will be apt. So I will start with you after the introduction. Yes, sir. I'm unmuting you. Kindly you speak, sir.
You want me to continue?
No. I want the father of. Yep. Yes, sir. Those disappearing, this organization.
Yes. I am Brito Fernando, representing the families of the disappeared.
Yeah.
We were involved in this issue since 1989. Once actually the present Prime Minister, Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa, was our leader in this campaign, and he took the leadership with Minister Vasudeva Kara. But now actually he's also being accused of disappearances, and he doesn't support us anymore. So we are still continuing with this issue. Even now, only after 30 years, we got some results with the 30/1 Geneva resolution,
Yeah.
but we didn't get any results in Sri Lanka yet.
That's wonderful, sir. Wonderful. The Disappearances Act, I hope it's not happening now. We are all humans. We should condemn it. Come whatever may. You have no right to kill people or abduct people when you cannot give life. Yes, sir. My good friend Faisal Mansoor, he has been the heart. Let me introduce him to the world because he has been the heart and soul of our various organizations which we are trying to work out. And Gunawardhane, I think he will be more interested to join us of now. We are trying to create a structure wherein you have an alternative for World Health Organization as well as United Nations. This is where all the drubbing impositions, prejudiced information has started. Now they have taken health as an example and pandemic, try to suppress the truth so that they curb your freedom, your rights are gone. So Faisal Mansoor, he happens to be our good mate in all those animated discussions. Though he likes it or not, as soon as we start, we ask him to go through his Ramadan fast and all, then join as quickly as possible. As we join, we don't let him go for another 2 hours. Anything else you would like to add, Faisal Mansoor? He's a farmer, he's an IT entrepreneur.
No, doctor, it's fine. Promise, Shanaki, we don't have much time. Let Shanaki go on now.
Right, done. Yes, madam. Yeah, please.
Hi, my name is Shanuki Dialvis, and I'm a consultant. I work with the development sector in creating campaigns for social movement and advocacy. I come from a background in marketing. And right now I'm here on this panel. I'm very grateful to be invited to be here, but I'm here in the capacity of a member of the core team of the Centenary Movement, which is a new movement, a political movement that has recently launched in Sri Lanka with the vision of changing the political culture in the country. So we're very much a part of trying to see our way out of this present crisis by training and educating a new youth, a new generation of youth leaders for Sri Lanka. So that's my capacity here today.
Wonderful. I wish you all good luck because it's youth who have to lead the way. Yes, madam. Tassi Dehlanji.
Hi, my name is Tassi. I am currently teaching at the Overseas in Colombo. I have been an educationist for many years and I've taught in international schools in Botswana and in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Apart from my teaching career, I'm also a social activist. I'm a member of the Easter Attack Survivors Project. I'm an advocate against sexual harassment and abuse, where I co-founded an organization called Stand By Me. And primarily, I'm passionate about helping the Muslim community wherever possible. Most recently, I have spearheaded the movement to retain and save up Muslim personal laws through awareness campaigns, webinars, a signature drive, and most recently, a very successful silent vigil. Furthermore, involved in the silent protests against the crisis our country is facing currently. I've been vocal against the need for change in governance to uplift the poor quality of the life Sri Lankans are facing at the moment and to secure a better and brighter future for the next generation.
Wonderful. I'm very fortunate to host all wonderful people. Next, madam. In the because you should pardon me because I may not be able to spell your names properly. You should all pardon me. Yeah, madam. Please go ahead.
That's you're pronounced correctly. Good evening, everyone. I'm Indi Akurubada. I'm a senior lecturer attached to the Department of Public Policy, University of Ruhuna. My field is political science and public policy.
Yep.
I think that's enough for the moment.
Yes, you are most important as a public policy maker. Yes, Raniel ji. One second. Yeah, please.
Okay. Hi, I'm Raniel Ryanson, and I'm a systems ecologist. I've been involved in the way forward for Sri Lanka since the 1970s when the government took a decision, and that's what because we got to know our history, we got to know how we got to this mess we got into, and then of course, I think I might have something to contribute to the way forward.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Wonderful to host you. Yeah, next, madam. Sarika Sirivardhana. Yeah. Please.
I graduated last year, and I'm going in to study human, social, and political sciences, and subsequently law. And I co-founded an organization called the Youth Awareness Project, which is focused on empowering women and children.
Wonderful.
But I think most relevant to this discussion is I am also a part of a movement. I hesitate to use the word movement, but an organization called Year for Democracy, which is essentially aimed at educating the youth in order to move forward as a country in terms of combining acts of dissent in terms of protests, as well as disseminating information at protests, but also subsequently, such that we can move forward as a country. So I'm mostly focused on youth efforts and youth involvement in this current political climate.
Wonderful. Prasanna Kureji, please. Yeah, one by one, just keep going so that we can get into. I think we have Kabir Hashim. I think he's the MP, present MP, I feel, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, good evening to everybody.
Yeah.
I'm Prasanna. I'm a physician by profession, and I'm a public health specialist.
Yeah.
And I'm a author and activist. And I represent today two organizations, Democratic Social Alliance and Consumers and Customers Collective. So we have come out with a proposal to face this situation. Actually, our proposals are for immediate action on the present crisis. So it's my responsibility to present those during my speech.
Wonderful to host you. Yeah, I think, let me go to Kabir Hashim. I think you are the present sitting MP, I feel, Member of Parliament. Am I right, sir?
Yes, thank you, everybody. Good evening. I'm Kabir Hashim. I represent the opposition party, the Samagi Janabala Vegya in Sri Lanka. I've been a legislator for approximately 28 years, out of which 22 years I've spent in the opposition, been in government just 6 years out of that 28 years. And in this critical time, I'm happy to be here with part of the civil society in Sri Lanka being represented in this program. Thank you for having me here. Appreciate it.
Wonderful, sir. Wonderful. I think you need to have some patience to bear us because we will keep you, because I want you to listen before I ask you to speak. Omar Khanji. Yes, sir.
I've had a love affair with Sri Lanka since 1993 when my wife and I first landed. And for an island called Serendip, our love of it was serendipitous indeed. And at that time, raging civil war showed me the hardiness, the resilience, the grace under fire of this magnificent collection of people.
Wonderful.
And we started a business here, which still continues. I'm a leadership consultant globally and have the privilege of working with companies here, but also consulting for the EU and others. COVID, when it hit here, we were here with our team. And so that's launched my life as a COVID researcher for the last 2 years. Over 60 articles I write every week in the Daily FT here, as well as other places. And watching a country that has responded so valiantly to tsunamis, rebounded from the Easter bombing on the tourist front, then was hit with COVID, then the Ukrainian crisis. I work with a lot of other expats who love this country, who have been hanging on, and everybody who comes here falls in love with it. So some of what I want to talk about is self-inflicted wounds and how we can stop trying to undo those natural gifts that are so abundant on this resplendent isle.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. The rest of my wonderful guests, I think you need to switch on your audio and video and do start identifying yourself, please. And it is just after vaccination, Sri Lanka's health started to go down, that we have been projecting it on the worldometer also, how they were managing COVID so efficiently. Once the vaccination started, how the deaths were occurring. As a doctor, I was feeling very sad and bad. Yes, Vishaka, can you switch on your video? What's your problem with the video? Vishaka, yeah, introduce yourself. I think you do introduce yourself, please. Vishaka, you can speak. Harold, Dimitu has appeared in before also, I think. Dimitu Atapattu, introduce yourself. Switch on your audio and video. Harold is there on 2. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Timothy Atapattu, freelance researcher of history, religion and culture of Sri Lanka, and a traditional psychic healer and astrologer, and social media activist. I'm here just as a participant. I think no special time allocated for me. Then I can participate as just only a participant. I think Spicer discuss about that.
Yeah, because you are going to be important now. You have to predict what is going to happen. You are astrologer. You are going to predict after all we speak.
Sorry, Mr. I couldn't hear you properly.
Atapattu ji, because you are an astrologer, after we all speak, you are going to.
I'm on some of a traditional ruling system of Sri Lanka.
Yes.
System of Sri Lanka. Mahasambatavada and Gramaraj have been Gramaraj Sankalpa in states, collective states of ruling systems in Sri Lanka before.
Wonderful. You should switch off your fan. There is some fan sound, your ceiling fan sound or something. It is just coming. Your fan speed. Your fan, ceiling fan. That sound is just reverberating into the. Okay, next, Vishaka or anyone else, Harold. Only few are left to introduce yourselves.
Hi everyone, my name is.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Educator in forestry. and also working on a project with new value on the landscape using the ecosystem services approach. This is an economic premise that I'd like to talk about with or as this discussion evolves. So thank you.
Yeah, you'll be important as youthful, and your contributions to today's discussion will be very, very important. So let me start. Anyone else? Fast, sir, so that let us not lose time. Make it fast. Anyone else to introduce yourself? Anyone else?
Tata is the only one we have to wait for.
Yeah. Then go ahead. I thought of just showing you something, but you can start now. Who would like to start? Who would like to start? You want to present something, or
So you start with your presentation, then we'll go with the different speakers.
yeah, I'm just showing just a glimpses of what I have received today. I'm just going to present this on your screen, and yeah, so I got it. I only hope it runs. Yeah, this is what they have sent me. Page 3. Just passing this fast so that the world can have it. The people who brought it out, their names are very much there on the screen for you to watch. I can play only few things. You have to just excuse me because there are wonderful guests. I want them to speak out from Lanka. Because you sent me, I'm just not disappointing you. I'm just rushing through. They are saying one family's corruption. This family rule, they say, it is happening in India too. Many parties here. Till proved no one is guilty. Family first, country second. Here too we find family first, state second. The battery of flattery received and enjoyed as lottery by a man from the coterie just flattens his growth inconspicuously but consistently. Family and extended family corrupt allies. Some names here, they have flashed, they have done some research on all these things. It is very much there in the public domain. Before I wanted to play, I just saw that SriLankaOats.com, that's the website from where you can source all this wonderful information. And everyone has right to veto it. That's why we prepare a flyer and release it 24 hours before, including with my mobile number. Anyone can join us. You can differ. Because we are here to discuss, debate and decide. That is democracy. Looting public money in the name of economic growth. It's happening everywhere. WEF, WTO, World Trade Organization, World Economic Forum. How they entice the young politicians. Family, they want family rule so that they can control one family. Laws of Hambanuta project maintained by Colombo Port. Our nation's economy will flourish under such laws. These are all Colombo Port City scam. We would like to hear from them. Loss of 70 billion. Lanka Airlines mismanagement. Ports, airlines, airports. A road infrastructure scam. Hayat East, that everyone is aware now. Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation, gas, gold overseas, money laundering, Greek bond scam, other scams to construction of whatever it is. It's all there displayed on your screen, and you can go to www.srilankaoats.com to find all these. And you say, here, you're all confused. I only promise to end the war in this country. Not any one of these like frauds, corruption and drugs. Apparently, 1 in 5 people in the world are Chinese, and there are 5 people in my family, so it must be one of them. Fine. China also doesn't want to help both Pakistan and Lanka when they are in distress. China Communication Construction Company, you're all aware. In a sense, China's investments are akin to predatory lending. They force Sri Lankans to borrow at higher rates for projects that economically benefit the lender, China. I think it is in Sinhalese. Freedom of speech and expression and the right. So that means that is not being practiced in Lanka. I don't know. Our wonderful guest will say. Rajapaksa turned on any dissent by even Sinhalese media and civil society activists. He confronted the world on human rights violations. Backed by China, it was the victor's arrogance. Some part I'm just trying to. Then here you find Chinese loans, and then how you land into these sort of problems. UNHRC, human relations, human rights. This is what is happening. Slowly. Comparison with world's most infamous dictators and corrupt politicians. Social impact on Sri Lanka after such big scams. Total loss, they put it at $54 billion. Epilogue, why Mr. should be behind bars. That's for the people of Sri Lanka and the world who love democracy to survive. So here are some of the things. Yeah, this is one aspect which I'll close it now. And then there is another one which is the youth of Sri Lanka. They say Sri Lanka youth won't let island nation maroon in financial crisis. Change course in 7 days. They have been shouting from the rooftop. This is for the headlines from me. And now you can start the discussion straight away. I'm going to put all these things. I will end them. Yes, one by one you can start, sir. So I'll not have any other interference going on.
I'll start.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Dr. Silva, can you give me the screen, please?
Yes, I'm giving.
Then I can.
Yes, Mr. Rani.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you are the present. You are the presenter now. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So now, let me see. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. So, then it's not coming on. Why? I'll say screen.
Share screen with the media and sound. Both you have to click. When you.
Okay. At the screen.
You put.
Okay.
You tick that bracket and then.
Okay. Hold on, let me see. Not now. Okay. Screen. It does not allow this.
I'll do one thing. Come out of it again. I'll make you.
Okay.
Someone else. I'll make them presenter and then bring you out. Again, I'll make you. Where is Raniel?
Yeah. No worries.
I am going to make you presenter. Don't worry. These channels are regularly on the hit list, and I am not showing another document from IMF and WEF how Lankans have been crucified, because I want you to speak out. Yes, Mr. Raniel, you are the presenter now. Mr. Raniel, switch on your audio. You are the presenter now.
Okay, I'm on. Let me see if I got my screen on now.
I think you should get it now. Or else you share it with me. You share it with me, I'll play. Just share it with me.
Okay.
You can.
How do I do this?
I'll just leave my mobile number, my WhatsApp number. You can send it through WhatsApp or through my mail.
Send me your mail because it's send me your mail to my.
I'm putting it for everyone. Yeah. Meanwhile, I want someone else to take the flow. Someone else start, please. Yeah, someone else start, please. Yeah. Whoever. Go ahead. Someone else
Isn't
speak.
it better, Dr. Siva? You name whoever should be speaking.
You start, sir. You start.
Okay. Okay. Uh, yeah. Thank you very much for inviting me. As I said before, I represent two organizations, Democratic Social Alliance and Consumers and Customers Collective. Just a brief description about the issue. As we see, it's a very acute problem that we haven't faced before in our recent history. And in a way, this is quite different to such situations that we faced before. For example, huge demonstrations of this kind. The main difference is these seem to be apolitical compared to the politically motivated demonstrations that we have seen before. And again, the other feature that we see is there's a large gathering of youth who are involved in this, who identify themselves as the members of the new generation, and their common popular slogan is "Don't mess with our generation." So here they have conveyed a very clear message to all of us, and I think their presence cannot be ignored. And at the same time, we see, well, at the very beginning, when these demonstrations began, we saw it was a kind of a threat to the organized political order of this country, and there were many political parties who kind of trying to criticize this. But anyhow, I think all the critics were silenced and sidelined with the growing demonstrations. So even I was there in the demonstrations yesterday, and what I personally experienced was there is a lot of vigor, commitment among the demonstrators, and it seemed to be that they are very keen taking this, continuing this. So anyhow, what we basically would like to see is that our country is anyway in a very bad situation, and today we came to know that we have officially announced that we are not in a position to pay back the loans, at least for the time being. So I understand with that we fall into the category of failed state or default state.
Mr. Prasanna.
So,
Mr. Prasanna,
sorry.
let me help you.
Yeah.
Let me help you now. See, what is the problem first? Why Lanka is shut down now? Why Lanka is bleeding? Why Lanka is in dark? Why people are on the roads? Bullet points, first, second,
Okay.
third, fourth, like
So,
that.
right, sure. Actually, I mean, those are the things that I would be, addressing in my presentation.
You have
that
presentation. Shall I make you a presenter?
to the crowd? So I will, yeah. So I mean, till now I was trying to give a preamble to my presentation. Okay. So
Shall I make you presenter?
now, right. Okay. So stopping it at that, and now I will get on with my presentation, which is 10 proposals that we propose, and these 10 proposals we expect to be taken up immediately or for immediate action to solve this
Now, shall I make you a
problem.
presenter?
And
Shall I make you a presenter?
Yes.
You want me to make you a presenter? You want to share the screen?
No. I will just read out.
Okay, sir. Please
this
go ahead, sir.
document
Please,
that I have in hand.
please go ahead,
Yeah.
sir.
So as we have identified, six broader areas. One is with regard to establishment of democracy, because we think failure of democracy is one major issue here. Then the issue of protecting national wealth, formalizing administration, establishment of rule of law, and provision of urgent assistance to the needy segments of our population. These are the broad areas. And under those, with regard to establishment of democracy, we propose abolishment of executive presidency, or if that cannot be done urgently, at least to revert back to the 19th Amendment. So that is our proposal number one. And number two, in terms of protecting national wealth, we propose to limit the cabinet ministerial portfolios to 20, and to scrap all other ministerial portfolios like deputy ministers and state ministers, etc., and also to reduce all ministerial perks, including the security expenditure, by 50%. The next proposal is to disclose the salaries and perks of all top governmental officials, including the members of the director boards of the statutory institutions. And by disclosing this, and thereafter to bring in ceiling to these drawings to acceptable, reasonable limits, because we know that like the politicians, even some government officials are very much involved in this forgery. And number four in our proposals is to make all governmental transactions, including the tenders, to make them accessible to the public for their study and scrutiny through the respective websites of the ministries and departments. The fifth point is to dissolve the director board of the Ceylon Electricity Board. Today we have a very acute problem related to electricity supply, and again, this is not a one-off thing. This has been happening for the past many years, recurring from time to time. And again, a well-known reason is there has been rampant corruption.
I have joined. I managed to get over the technical problem and I have joined.
Wonderful, sir. I'll call you once your turn happens. Immediately I'll call you, sir. Don't worry. Next itself I'll call you. Yeah,
so,
please.
What we ask is to dissolve the present electricity board membership, and to appoint a new board membership who are capable of addressing this issue. And in terms of formalizing administration, we propose all cabinet decisions to be made accessible to the public for their study and scrutiny through their relevant websites. The next point is to expose the educational and other qualifications of the high officials, including the government top brass, the bureaucracy, and these to be scrutinized by a special commission appointed by the parliament, and unqualified persons should be expelled with immediate effect, and the vacancies created thereby should be filled by calling applications and selecting through interviews and competitive exams. The eighth proposal is to implement and give wide publicity to a programmed aid at eliminating corruption in the country at all levels. And we propose to get the assistance of the university academics and civil activists who are especially interested in this field. And in terms of establishment of rule of law, we propose to allow the judiciary and the police to exercise the rule of law in the country without any impediments, to facilitate the establishment of a mechanism from among the members of the judiciary to prevent all forms of interferences from the politicians, businessmen, and other powerful segments of the community. The last point that we propose is to provide urgent assistance to the needy segments of our population, because we see that there's a big share of our population who are facing immense economic and social hardships because of this, because of the current economic situation in the country. So that's all about for my presentation. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank
I
you
think
for
Mr.
listening.
Faisal Mansoor, you guide us, because I'm just not able to. And I have the presentation ready. If Mr. Raniel is there, the presentation is also ready. If he wants to immediately speak. Yes, sir.
Sanuki on please now. Sanuki, would you like to go ahead?
Raniel,
I can do
Yes.
that.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay, I can do that.
Let Sanuki.
Ready?
yeah, Ranil ji, once she's done, once she's done, then I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Yeah, please,
Fine.
go ahead.
Well,
Okay. Thank you once more. I'm not going to take a lot of time because I'm conscious of the fact that we have a lot of speakers. So I'm going to keep it as short and brief as I possibly can. I think everyone here will kind of echo the one thing is that this crisis is not something that happened overnight. It's something that has built over years of abuse of power, mismanagement of finances, and a lot of things, you know, that the current regime has been complicit to, that has led to a lot of resentment over the years that has built and built and built to the point of this current situation where with the present fuel crises and the electricities and the gas crises, it kind of tipped and triggered a whole generation to come out onto the streets and start demonstrating and protesting. And what we are seeing is an unprecedented way of these protests happening because, as was mentioned, it is completely non-partisan, it is apolitical, and people are simply on the streets crying out. And there are two main asks. I think there are lots of different organizations, different civil service organizations and political groups that are coming out with their demands in reference to this current crisis. But I think if you look at what the protesters are asking for, there's this two main asks out there that everybody is praying for, and that is that the president step down and that the family, the dynastic family that is ruling, step down from their portfolios. That's the main thing. And then beyond that, what next is the expectation that we look at a new system, a new political culture coming into Sri Lanka. So I'm not going to talk too much on any of that because I think everybody here knows what our problem in Sri Lanka is, and the crisis is the fact that the Rajapaksa family needs to pay their dues, and people are asking for receipts, and we are demanding accountability. In that light, the Centenary Movement, which is an organization that I'm representing here today, it is an organization that launched 2 years ago with the objective of grooming an entirely new generation of political leaders by 2048, which would be 100 years of independence in Sri Lanka. And what we have done is we've selected brilliant, incredible young leaders from all 25 districts of Sri Lanka, and we continue to do that. We put them through sort of training and educating and mentoring in the hands of experts, well-known academics and mentors from around Sri Lanka, to give them the tools and to equip them with the necessary tools that we want in the leaders in Sri Lanka, the tools that the current leaders of Sri Lanka don't seem to have or demonstrate. So that's what we're working towards, and we've seen some good things coming out with the cohorts. And within these young people who are being trained now to take over or to sort of run for office in the future, They themselves are coming out with their policy asks. They're developing policies under different pillars on how they would like to see Sri Lanka moving forward. So that is our long-term goal. But in relation to this current crisis, the Centenary Movement has just 2 weeks ago, we had a press conference where we actually presented our own 12 demands. I'm not going to take your time going through all of it. But in relation to this particular crisis, we're looking at short-term demands where we think accountability is kind of the key thing that runs across all 12 demands, where we want all members of cabinet. One thing is that we don't want in this crisis for the MPs or the cabinet to be allowed to leave the country, because that's kind of like the general playbook is that take your money and get out before anybody catches you. And we are demanding that that does not happen. Nobody should be allowed to leave the country, whether it's the Rajapaksa family or the cabinet. And we are insisting that everybody and their networks, their asset declaration happens. And then that of course the executive presidency needs to be abolished, and we need to also abolish the 20th Amendment, which gives the president all powers to abuse it as he will. And one other big ask, which is also part of this whole crisis, is the fact that we have a Prevention of Terrorism Act that allows the government and the Ministry of Defense in particular to just arrest people without question. And that has been happening over the years. And we've seen it happening in the current crisis as well, where young demonstrators, young peaceful protesters have just been taken in. They've been arrested, they've been beaten up, they've been tortured and questioned, and they are not given legal recourse. And that Prevention of Terrorism Act can be used above the heads of anyone. The government can just come into my house and take me into prison without any questions, and my parents would know where I am. And that's happened to journalists, it's happened to dissenters, and that's been kind of a tool that's been used to keep people quiet. And so one of the asks that we are demanding right now as well, because there is a crisis at stake, because there are young people out there protesting peacefully. I must stress that it is peaceful, because the international media has continuously said that it's violent protests. It is not violent protests. They are being very peaceful about it, but they're being very violent about it. But PTA can be addressed. We are asking that.
Vishaka, one second, madam. One second, madam. Vishaka ji, Vishaka, I think you have to mute yourself, please. Mute yourself. Vishaka Tilakaratna ji, mute yourself, please. Mute yourself. When your turn comes, you can speak, please. Kindly mute yourself. Wonderful. Yes, madam, you go ahead.
I'm not going to take any more time.
No, go ahead. You are speaking. You are hitting the bullseye. And we want to tell you that Lankans are speaking, and this is what is happening in Lanka. And you are going to put it, because entire world is watching this channel. And I assure you, all those youngsters who have been disappearing, bring their photographs, their family names. Next time when we do a show, we will have everything flashed on the screen so that the entire world watches, because we are here to protect democracy, people participatory constitutional democracy. Please go ahead, madam.
No, I'm actually done. I'm going to let everybody else have their turn as well. But this is what we are asking, and this is what we as the Centenary Movement are doing, is we're trying to design a new vision and a new future for Sri Lanka. We're doing what we can to make that happen. And in addition, we support the current protests. We are behind, and we're supportive of all the young people out there. And we're fully with them on what they're asking for.
Wonderful. Yes, Faisal ji, shall I call Mr. Raniel with this presentation?
Yes, please.
Oh, what is happening with this presentation? Where did it go? Oh, it is here. Yeah.
All right, you got my presentation?
Yeah, now I just checked. It is there very much. Now I'll just share the screen so that the world can have a glimpse of your wonderful presentation. Yeah.
Great, and we can go through. Okay. If you can give me
you can go.
You can put it on.
Oh, wait. Are you able to watch it on the screen?
Yes. Okay, you got to give it full screen.
No. I'll do one thing, because let me take it back to my. Yeah. Now it is there clearly. Now I'll make it full screen. Yeah. is, yeah. Yeah, is this okay?
Okay. It's not full screen, but that's all right.
It's not
I think
full
people
screen.
can still read it.
No, wait.
Okay.
Option. No. This is not the one. I don't know where it is in your case. Oh, you're just coming out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Come again.
Yeah.
I think we can read it the way it was. Doctor, it will take too much time otherwise.
Yeah. I'll just trying to, because I just don't know which part of this thing is using. Yeah. You can read now.
Okay, yeah, just quickly go through that. There's a few slides there.
Yeah, please.
What I'm basically trying to tell you is that we have to consider where we came from if you're going to go forward, because the crisis began in Sri Lanka, because we got into this whole business of getting into the industrial revolution, and industrial production and urban development became the national priorities. And no attention was paid to those who cautioned against it. Now, here's an example. An official communique in Sri Lanka in 1979 said, "No oil means no development, and less oil, less development. It is oil that keeps the wheels of development moving." And up to today, this is what runs this nation. Now, if you look at what, in contrast, where the oil comes from, in Amazonia, where this little hut is, where these people live in Amazonia, under them there is oil. They say oil represents the spirits of the dead. Ask it for power, you sacrifice your children. And looking at what's happening to the planet today, it certainly looks like, the unlettered swine in Amazonia were more concerned about the future and their children than our nation's parliament that you saw there. Next slide. When you go to the next slide, you see what happens with this development process. As you move land into industrial production and urban development, you start losing the ecosystem services of any landscape. And this is facilitated by fossil consumption. And if you go to the next slide, please, you see the whole process. And this is what development is. We are trained to run around like rats in a maze, work harder, happiness is around the corner, you can earn some more money, you got to create this economy, we got to work harder, buy more things. So development now is based on the consumption of oil, and it leads to a complete addiction of oil and fossil energy. And all of our nations have gone there. We have said, oh, this is development. We have become total addicts to oil and oil energy. Next slide, please. Now, if you go down with this, what happens is, right, to service oil addiction, roads must replace the farms. And the next slide, right, and with urbanization, all the soil functions cease. Now, the soil, the earth and the sky has been communicating from the time of creation. Now, we call urbanization, we go and seal the soil forever. There is no water going into the soil, there's no gases coming out of the soil. The soil, air, discourse is sealed forever, and we call that development. And this is what our fossil-driven development gives us. Next slide, please. We go on this route and we go to agriculture. And with the industrialization of agriculture, you need a huge amounts of fossil fuel in order to produce our food. Look at this figure. I mean, Saudi Arabia uses 4.5 tons fossil energy to give 1 calorie of food energy. So this is the direction that fossil energy is pushing agriculture create what is called
Yeah, please, someone, 1 second, 1 second, Ranilji. Kindly switch off your, kindly mute yourself. Someone has just picked up the mobile. Kindly mute yourself and speak, please. Please, yeah, Mr. Ranil.
Yeah, Ranjan, please switch off your mic.
Ranilji, speak. With industrialization of agriculture. Ranilji, go ahead.
Unmute.
Mr. Ranil, please go ahead.
Okay, let's go. So this whole question of industrialization and calling development tied to fossil fuels is what has given us this destructive process today. Next slide, please. All this development activity now that we're talking about is based upon and made possible by treating the cost of burning fossil fuel as a negative externality to make the environment, the public, us, pay the cost. There are two kinds of externalities, negative and positive. I'll talk about the positive later, but negative is what is affecting us today. Next slide, please. And with the negative externality, what is the consequences is we are following the industrial revolution, the first revolution, the second, third, etc. All of them require fossil energy. And this fossil energy, as we see, is pushing the temperature, global temperature upwards. This is the price of development. Next slide, please. The next slide shows us the price we are going to pay. And that is, as the temperature goes up, and all over the world this is happening, and it passes 39 degrees to 40 degrees, that is the level where photosynthesis can operate. Beyond that, chlorophyll starts denaturing. And when that happens, no more food, no more plants, everything begins to die. And all over the world, Pakistan, India, is happening now. Areas where the temperature is going over 40 degrees. And if this is sustained over time, and climate change says this is going to happen, agriculture is going to be very dangerous into the future for all of us. Next slide, please. So this brings us to the future. What are we going to do? What are the design considerations for the future? Can the corporation monocultures, I mean, look at the figure here. On the left-hand side, there's this huge monoculture. If the temperature goes up and is uniform over that area, all the crops are gone. You get nothing out. Look at the picture on the right. That is a polyculture with trees and plants, with the agriculture interspersed in between. Trees and plants create what is called transpirative cooling. They hold the temperatures down. So what kind of landscapes are we going to design into the future? This is what we have to be thinking about. What is the way forward? Here's some of the goals that can determine the way forward. Next slide, please. Some of the goals that we say that can take us forward is we need a system change so that we achieve an economic system that values productivity without reliance on fossil energy, and renewable energy with decentralized production becomes a development goal. A system where the values of ecosystem services can be realized. An environmental system where the life support system is not compromised, where biodiversity is recognized as a valid indicator of ecosystem change and stability. A public health system where the national goals is to decrease the rate of non-communicable diseases through the control of dietary and environmental toxins, in addition to upgrading the current reactive care response. These are directions we have to move on into the future. And I'll give you an example of one. That is when we are starting looking at ecosystem services. We have looked at that. We have created a company. Sri Lanka has created the first company to go into this area to move into the new economy, which we believe is necessary if we are going to avoid this crisis that we are moving into, consuming fossil, consuming our oxygen, and not putting anything back, going on negative externalities for our development. We have to move towards positive. Next slide, please. what we are doing that then a system that we have created is looking at life force. This is a system that is in operation now. You come to our webpage and see what we do. We get the monies come in as investment. It goes into the communities. Next slide down, please. You will see how the communities are being paid for the oxygen and the clean water they produce in addition to the plant or the tree or the unit they're looking after. This is creating a new economy, a new value system, new set of values based upon positive externalities. And if you look at positive externalities, World Bank estimates there is over $114 trillion per year to be made from ecosystem services, and nobody has capitalized on that as yet. I'm proposing that this company is now proposing a way to capitalize on that. If Sri Lanka moves in this direction, we can have a whole new area of creating wealth while enriching the rural area. Next slide, please. It shows you this shows you the summary of a unit we have been working with. These are the war widows up in Cherikulam who've been working with these number of units, and you look at the amount of oxygen they have produced and the clean water contracted that they have produced, and you look at the dollar value, and then you can see the potential of using these ideas to develop a totally new direction of development and get away from fossils. Finally, I'd like to show you that Sri Lanka has been ahead in these things because at COP21, 5-6 years ago, we, Sri Lanka, did point out these things. The world hasn't acted on it yet. Now, with what I'm demonstrating to you, Sri Lanka, we have decided to act on it and demonstrate to the world what's possible. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a wonderful presentation, and I hope you'll agree your non-fossil way of approaching the issue through Dr. TSPR channels. We are connecting people from wherever they are. You need not come to the studio. I need not send you any camera. And this is how we should be. Only when in need we can have physical interactions. Wonderful presentation, Mr. Raniel ji. Yes, Faisal ji. Go ahead.
We go with Brigadier Ranjan now. Ranjan, can you keep it to 6 minutes, please?
Yes, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Can I start now?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I'm among the very few still remaining in the land of the living who were eyewitnesses to the handing over of our country by our colonial masters to our leaders for self-rule on 4th February 1948. I can still see in my mind's eye the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, who represented the Queen, Sir Henry Monk Mason Moore, the Governor, D.S.L. Naik, the first Prime Minister, Sir John Kutalavala, S.W.R.D. Bandar Naik, T.B. Jaya, G.G. Ponnambalam, S.J.V. Chelvanayakam, to name a few. Our colonial masters handed over to our rulers a country whose economy they developed to be among the foremost in the region. There were no debts or liabilities. There was no need for deficit budgeting. In fact, the Galway project, the first development project we undertook, was completed with the funds they left behind for us. Today, after 74 years of self-rule, we are a bankrupt country. The downward trend accelerated about 1956 when populist ideology combined with race and religion began to dictate the country's political direction. The rulers who ruled the country during this period and their parties are accountable to the sovereign people for this gross mismanagement. They have forfeited the right to govern us hereafter. That is what the protesters are saying all over the country and abroad when they demand a complete overhaul. The way forward. First, the IMF must The IMF assistance thought should be given to a government the people trust and have confidence in. Second, this objective can be achieved in one of three ways, and the IMF should demand it. First, either by holding a fresh general election, or holding a referendum, or imposing sanctions on those who are politically and administratively accountable. If current laws are inadequate, new laws should be passed to achieve this objective. If the danger of extra constitutional action with its attendant bloody consequences is to be prevented. Further, 1. The country must negotiate for a moratorium on loan payments. 2. Negotiate and restructure loans to be paid back. 3. Transfer to the IMF loans taken on commercial terms, especially from countries like China. 4. Reduce import expenditure by increasing agricultural and industrial production. We did this with turmeric. 5. Increase import income. India's agricultural exports alone crossed $50 billion in the financial year 2022, in spite of COVID-19 and unprecedented logistical challenges. 6. Privatize loss-making state-owned enterprises. Even India privatized Indian Airlines, selling it to Tatas. The private sector should be the engine of growth. It should be in the driving seat. 8. Stop import of all non-essential items until the economy is revived. 9. Obtain technical advice and restructure and rebuild the country's financial and political institutions. If it is claimed we have the expertise, I agree. Unfortunately, our homegrown democracy has no room for them. 10. Seek bridge financing to tide over the interim period. 11. Take suitable and decisive legal action against all those responsible for this financial debacle to ensure it will never happen again. 12. The advent of the IMF will improve the country's credit rating and investor confidence. Much more can be done to improve ground conditions to attract investors. Ease of doing business needs to be improved and brought on par with other countries. The work ethic of the workers has room for improvement. Here we could take an example from Japan. Make in Sri Lanka should be the slogan. 13. Send a petition to IMF online or otherwise, stressing the importance of giving its aid to a government the people trust. Giving aid to be handled by the incumbent government which is accountable is wasteful. The petition should be signed by at least 7 million signatories. This will prove to the IMF beyond reasonable doubt that the incumbent government has lost legitimacy. This pressure from the IMF will be a great force to hold fresh elections. 14. The Constitution be suitably amended. Constitution should be suitably amended so that the cabinet reflects truly, not literally, the multiracial and multi-religious composition of Sri Lankan society. And finally, another amendment needed to the Constitution is to attract talented people to government irrespective of race and religion, instead of the country's worst elements as at present. Thank you.
Yes, wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Ranjan.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I call on Sachi next, please? Sachi Dalam, could you go next?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Heartfelt thank you, Dr. Reddy, for organizing this webinar, for giving importance to the current crisis in Sri Lanka. I'm bringing to this discussion today a slightly different perspective, a personal perspective as a Sri Lankan Muslim. I know we're all here to discuss the current situation and discuss steps to move forward, but it's important to also note the journey we've already been on and the past atrocities that have brought us to this crisis. We all say enough is enough, and I wish to speak from my heart now and explain my viewpoint. When I was studying here in the 80s, nobody bothered if we were Sinhalese, Hindu, Muslim, or Burgher. We were all Sri Lankan. We saw no divisions. We celebrated our similarities. We respected our differences. I firmly believe our civil war changed all that. I left sunny Sri Lanka in 1989 for Africa. The war in our country was raging, and my husband and I decided to venture out to a better life overseas. And after 20 years in Africa, we decided to finally come back home in April 2009. No sooner we repatriated, the war ended, and I really look forward with much hope for a brighter future in our lovely motherland. However, after the war, the focus on discrimination against the Tamil community seemed to have ended, and there seemed to be a new target for oppression and discrimination, that was the Muslims. Each year, we heard of more and more atrocities that the Muslim community was facing. We couldn't eat what we wanted, we could not wear what we wanted. Everything we did seemed to be twisted to somehow tarnish our image and bring about disrespect. And after years and years of bullying and hatred, we then faced the April bombings, where although the perpetrators had Muslim names, they were shunned by the entire Muslim community as attacking innocent people and committing suicide has no place in Islam. Furthermore, although these bombers did not even receive a Muslim burial, the entire Muslim community was blamed for this disaster, and we were all labeled terrorists. So much antagonism and hate speech directed at one community. Then, we were blamed for bringing COVID-19 to Sri Lanka. And the final nail in the coffin was when 192 countries around the world were burying COVID victims. Sri Lanka decided that they had to be cremated. This was absolutely unforgivable, as there were no substantial reasons for enforcing cremation over burial. And what about the roller coaster we've been on with our Muslim personal laws being threatened to be abolished? So activists like me have been fighting for our rights for what seems like an eternity, and we still do not know where we stand, even today. We have joined protests, we've voiced our concerns to the powers that be, but we have seen nothing. Now, add all of these frustrations to the recent developments that we've seen in the past few months. I have never had to stand in a line to buy gas. I've never had to sit for ages in a queue to fill my tank with petrol. I have never struggled to pay university fees due to foreign exchange restrictions. I've never had to cut back on food preparation due to shortages, import restrictions. Let's not even get started on the grueling hours of sweat and torture through electricity blackouts. This is Sri Lanka, once known as the Paradise Island. The pearl of the Indian Ocean, our motherland was referred to. Look at the sorry state we are in now. Recently, there has been an uprising of all citizens, a call to stand together as a united Sri Lanka, and it is happening everywhere. We are finally one, united in our diversity, filled with a sense of purpose and a common goal to save our wonderful country. My heart goes out to the people who have lost their jobs and cannot put food on the table, and my heart bleeds for the school children whose education has been disrupted. I feel for all the people who cannot afford basic essentials due to the skyrocketing of prices and the rationing of products. I empathize with all the mothers who are suffering with crying babies due to lack of milk powder, lack of nourishment, lack of electricity due to power outages. Yes, all of this is terrible, but we are facing our worst moments now, because after days of hundreds of thousands of Sri Lankans protesting for a change in governance, nothing has come about. We need strong leadership to take us out of this quagmire, set us on the road to recovery. We need things to change. We cannot go on destroying this once beautiful, resplendent isle. Our future generations need a place that they can call home. They need to be proud of their heritage and be patriotic to their motherland. We see so many youngsters wanting to flee to other countries. Why? We owe it to them to enforce the change that is needed. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think don't worry, we are all humans first, and then we are all citizens of combined countries. So, my heart goes to all of you. Yep.
Dr. Wood, are you there? Thank you.
You need to switch on. Yeah. You're on.
Yeah. Thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to take an academic viewpoint in this talk, and I will not get much time. I call the current crisis in Sri Lanka as a political-economic crisis, because I feel that the arbitrary political decisions of the current regime led to an economic crisis at the moment, and it's a kind of like it's a bunch of crises. It's not one, and also this economic crisis drove the people to protest. Now the people ask for a political change, so it's kind of crisis coming as stage by stage. So now we are in a turning point, as many speakers mentioned here. And at present, we observe that the passive public sphere we had earlier has turned into an active political movement. That's a very positive thing, according to me. So earlier we had different protests in different places in the island, and they had different demands. So like teachers, farmers, and university students, many of them did protests in different areas and fought under different slogans. But now we have come under one common slogan. So all the people, I mean, majority of the people say, go home, Gota. So it's a common slogan now. And then the specialty here is that now the people who voted for Rajapaksa criticize them and pointing out on their fraud, nepotism, extremism, corruption, and governing malpractices. It's interesting, and also we have to think in a different perspective. I would like to say, now here we need to ask why these people did not feel these things earlier when they voted in the presidential election and the parliamentary election. Why now they are talking about these things? So I have a question about this, and why they have decided to vote to Rajapaksas, and later why they have decided to protest against them. So it's interesting. That's what I'm telling. And also now there is a big fight for democracy. During the previous government, the good governance era from 2015 to 2019, some of the extremists, they tried to draw a different picture about democracy. They said it's not the way to rule a country. But now, again, the need of democracy has come out, and the people and the youngsters who promoted the image of Gotabaya Rajapaksa and also the government, they have got a turning point, and they say, okay, now enough, now go back. And I would like to ask why these people suddenly changed. Because of the economic crisis, and there are so many shortages at the moment: fuel, gas, fertilizer, and long-lasting power cuts, and food and medicine shortages. So with this, I feel that people felt that, okay, we need to change. But why? They did not feel it for democracy. When we were campaigning for democracy, they say, no, our hero is Gotabaya Rajapaksa, and we are going to vote for Gotabaya Rajapaksa, and the SLPP and for the SLPP, but later why they have changed, that's a question. And seeing at all the misuses of power, so strong decentralization of power brought through the 20th Amendment, and giving presidential pardon to murderers, and withdrawals of cases of Rajapaksa henchmen. Seeing all these things, why people remain silent for more than 2 years? And even the people who have joined in youth protests, earlier I have mentioned, these people drew street murals to promote the image of Gotabaya Rajapaksa earlier. So we cannot forget these issues when we try to think about a way forward. So I'll quickly move on to my proposals against the background of this. So today, you all know that we are bankrupted, and also we are in a deadlock, nowhere to go. So we have to think about a different option and how to go out of this crisis, economic crisis. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a political economic crisis. And we cannot imagine a self-withdrawal or a resignation of Rajapaksas. They have a huge greed of power. Therefore, we need to find a quick political solution through the remaining political institutions, because it's not a time for a fresh election, because we don't have money and there are so many problems, as I have mentioned earlier. So we cannot go to a quick election. So we need to go through the remaining institutions, such as the parliament. I'm glad that there is a parliament member here. And the protesters need to aim at forcing the parliament members to bring an impeachment against the president and a no confidence motion against the government. They need to sign it quickly and pass it in the parliament. Otherwise, I cannot see an option. If they do not resign, what can we do? So are we going for a revolution, or are we heading out for military rule or something like that? I don't think. We still have a hope on democracy. And we do not have the power to recall public representative. We don't have it. I propose to bring a proposal to the parliament to get the power to recall. Because we have to wait, even if we don't like the representative who we have voted earlier, we have to wait till their term ends. Otherwise, we cannot recall. And finally, against the background of the current situation, so we need to find constitutional solutions. We are the parliament, because the time is limited. So now we have to act. No time. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yes, Faisalji.
So now I would like to call on Mr. Kabir Hashim MP to tell us about his experiences in the government and how he got here and how his party thinks are going to move forward.
I hope he will relate all the speakers' echoing voice on democracy.
Yes, thank you. I have a hard job, I know. What I have to say is, I think somebody asked me to tell me how I got to Parliament and stuff. I'll be very brief. In 1994, I contested as a young person with Gamini Disanayaka, and I won the elections, got elected. I've been in parliament for the last 28 years, representing the Kegol district. And as I said, I have been most of the time in the opposition. The majority of the time we've had just in the 28 years, 5 to 6 years of government. In that period, I've seen a lot, and there's this thing about all 225 MPs should be kicked out, and I think that's absurd because, like in any profession, there are bad people. Unfortunately, politicians, the majority are bad, but that doesn't mean everybody is bad. If you take the doctors, most of the doctors who got free education are manipulating the system and making loads of money. They have no ethical duties when they work. The lawyers, they do all kinds of stuff which is not ethical. In every profession, there is the same issue, right? But that doesn't mean you put everybody in one basket, because there are people who are committed, who stood for the right thing for democracy. And in the last, there's a lot of things to say, but it'll take too much time. But just to tell you what really happened, if you look at Enron, I would say that this is not to also say that that my party did everything right, but up to 1994, there was a policy on which the government worked. There was a clear economic policy. The open market economy was the one that was pushed by the United National Party, and we opened up, and as you know, we got the free trade zone, which was one of the first in not South Asia, in Asia. Even the Chinese Prime Minister Deng Xiaoping sent a team to look at our model. That was how good we were, how early we were. And we started manufacturing exports. Then we started the garment factory concept, which was excellent. We started earning millions of dollars. Then we started also foreign employment. We started our embassies and diplomatic relations in the Middle East for the first time in the 80s. And then we get $7 billion a year from foreign remittances. All that, the export drive went well. The agriculture sector, the largest irrigation project since the early King's days was the Mahavali. Right through, there was projects of that magnitude undertaken by those governments, and we were self-sufficient in rice. We were doing pretty well agriculturally, and we were pushing our exports. So basically, the country was an export-driven economy. After '94, the scenario changed. To an extent, it went on, but in 2005, when President Rajapaksa came in, what happened was, if you look at the borrowings, in between 2004 and 2009, our borrowings, foreign borrowings, if you convert it to rupees, went up by rupees 2,323 billion. Fair enough, it was during the war, perhaps we borrowed for the war. But the problem is, after 2009, between 2009 and 2014, our borrowings went up almost 100%. The borrowings during that period was 4,709 billion rupees, the foreign borrowings. And most of it went for projects which did not earn a single dollar. It was for white elephant projects, virtually infrastructure, construction-driven development. Now, construction-driven development on borrowed funds is just a bubble. So we put up buildings, we put up highways, we put up convention halls, we had airports all over, we had highways where nobody still uses, not even 20% of it is used. So all this didn't have any returns in terms of paying back in dollars. So that those borrowings all came on long-term borrowings where they matured around 2015 onwards. So when the Yahapalana government came to power, they had to start repaying these loans. They managed the the fiscal position well. They managed to pay off, but they managed to stabilize the economy at the same time. But in 2019, when President Gotabaya Rajapaksa came, he reduced our revenues, and that crashed the whole economy, cut the government revenue. So that was the problem. So basically, that 2012-13 period, though the country showed a high growth, there's a bubble, and it was construction driven, and it was borrowed money. It was not sustainable, and it was not earning dollars. So we haven't we haven't had one new project from 1994 onwards in terms of foreign earnings. We've been still surviving on the pre-1994 period. Now that was another problem. Basically, why did people, in two governments in 2001, there was a reform process about unbundling the CEB, the Ceylon Electricity Board, to make it competitive, to stop the losses. But there was a big political campaign and we got knocked out. The petroleum, the cost of the losses in the petroleum, we tried a price formula. That was also construed by the opposition at that time, the SLPP, as something that was harmful to the people. So a lot of reforms that were tried out were stopped by using this false sense of nationalism, patriotism, which has been the curse, because people mixed up patriotism, nationalism with this false racism that this party used to come into power. We need to address that directly, because otherwise we would again fall in trap to that. So basically, that same thing happened between the 2015 to 19. The reforms, whatever reforms were being tried, because the development was stopped. I do accept that Mr. Prasanna Kure spoke about a few changes that must come. I think those are very clear. I do accept that we failed to take action against the corrupt people during that 2015 to 19. That was a big fault. And also in our government, there were few people who were corrupt. That damaged the government at that time. There are issues, but overall the economy was managed pretty well. So now to cut short all that and to come to the point, many speakers reflected here today. The young people on the ground are talking about a system change in which the culture of politics should change. I cannot agree better than that. I think that's quite right. So we as a party have already decided that we will definitely support the move of the young people on the ground. We think that because it's something we stood up for, it's something that we difficult to accept it. So basically, one is abolishing presidency. We are actually putting forward a bill on the 18th or 19th when Parliament, and we are also looking forward to asking for amending the 20th Amendment to repeal the 20th Amendment and come back to the 19th Amendment, which is much more in line with democracy. We are also asking for an asset declaration by all politicians to be made public. We are looking for transparency and accountability. And about the limited cabinet, yes, I think I'm not 100% sure of the numbers we have decided on, but we've also spoken about the same thing. So we have already made a public statement in this account, the SJB, that we think these requests are legitimate and this is the need of the hour and political parties should come together. We are trying to lobby this in Parliament. We are asking the government members also to support us to immediately, because the 20th Amendment can be repealed with a 2/3 in Parliament. Abolishing the presidency, unfortunately, we may need to go to a referendum, but we can come to an agreement on a time period on which the presidency should be abolished. That is, the government side should convince Rajapaksas to agree to that. I do agree that the problem, as Shanki Dialvi said, this problem didn't come suddenly. Everyone has a sense of responsibility. It came over the years. We need to therefore make these changes accordingly. Now, the question about Indi Aprugoda, I finally heard talking about why did people vote the Rajapaksas and why are they going against them? Because they voted them last time because they raised their feeling of nationalism mixed with the racist lines to say that the Sinhala Buddhist community was under threat. A false sense of danger. They've presented them with a huge kind of a demon that was going to take over the nation. The rights of Sinhala people were going to be taken over, that their share is going to the minorities. And then they formed this kind of state capitalist authoritative model in which the Rajapaksas and those who supported them, the media houses that supported them, who are all looking for deals. And business, a few selected businessmen who have absolute protection today in their businesses and minting money in a closed economy, those are the people who supported this move, but that was construed as being patriotic. But why are these people on the road? Because in the last few years, they never got affected by anything. Because in the last few years, it was either the very poor in the villages, the farmers, maybe the minority communities who were at the brunt of it. But for the first time, every citizen of this country, whether he lives in the upper class in Columbus 7 or whether he lives in a village or in the urban or suburban area, most of their people who use air conditioners can't put their ACs on. They can't put their generators because there is no diesel. So they can't run their vehicles. So anybody and everybody is affected. Now they began to see there was something wrong. So people have got affected, right? Every citizen is affected in some way or the other. So it's a good call. It's a wake-up call for the country. It's been a good call for people like us, politicians, that we need to also change, that people don't want us anymore if we are not willing to listen to the people. So in a sense, I think there's a positive outcome if we can stand together and withstand this pressure. Right now, what we are looking at is not about political power, to be able to have a stable government, because the IMF program can only be successful under a stable government. And that is crucial, because if we don't push through the IMF program, and if we don't start now restructuring the debt, since you've already gone in for a preemptive default, we need to start negotiating with the creditors and make sure that confidence is there. Only then, in 1-2 months, will Sri Lanka's fiscal credibility or macro credibility in the international markets come back, which will help us to stabilize our country. So that's critical that we go towards all these goals. First, stabilize the interim government, and then call for an election date within 6 months, maybe, or certainly within a year, but it should be 6 months, so that we get out of this rut. So that's, I think, as much as I can say in this short time. You can ask me any questions.
Yeah. You, as a parliamentarian, of 28 years long standing, there are comments that Sri Lanka built harbour on the land and city in the sea, and that is ridiculous. So how can you just mismatch the money? And then there is another question asking whether UNP will have youth to be taking the lead. And how do you look at these scenarios of the youth on the roads? Entire Sri Lanka is in dark, and still they say one family, the corruption is at its heights. And don't you think even it is the opposition's failure to address this issue at a very early stage to sensitize people so that this situation would not have arisen at all?
I couldn't get your first question, Dr. Prasad.
The first question was they were trying to put it across. Sri Lanka has become world famous in constructing a harbour on the land and a city in the sea.
Yeah. Yes. So I would like to say that one thing is, people saw these things in 2005, between 2005 and 2015. They looked at all the projects that were going on. And the perception in the country, I'm sad to say, I have to be very blunt, that people thought the Rajapaksas are the only ones who are building Sri Lanka. They measured building development by physical infrastructure. They failed to see that our social infrastructure was not being invested upon. Rajapaksas showed everything in physical infrastructure. So they looked at concrete, there were highways all over, there were airports coming up. People never stood up against it. Right? Not even civil society movements, but we as a party in the opposition kept on pointing out that it was wrong. When they built the city in the sea, the government wrote 100 acres as freehold in a high security area to the Chinese government. It was us who protested against it, and we said, if you come back, if we were elected, we will cancel that. We did that. When we came back in 2019, we cancelled the freehold and we converted it into a lease. So we stood by what we said. We never made it a political rhetoric. We stood up against a powerful country, but we did the right thing. At the same time, we have we took steps to do reforms, but the country didn't support us. Like I said, in 2001, there was moves to restructure all the failing government enterprises, which takes billions of rupees, state money. But we didn't get the support. We were thrown out by the unions. We went out of power as a result. In 2015 to 19, we were also trying to restructure the economy. When we tried to, we knew that we have to be competitive in the global economy. When we tried to sign a free trade agreement with Singapore, it was considered as a sellout of the country to Singapore. That was all rubbish. It was a load of rubbish. Today, the entire East Asian region has come together with the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Program, and they've signed agreements with each other. Trade is happening within countries. If you don't work together with other countries, you cannot develop. So that was stifled. People then, when there was a project with the Americans, they were putting in $500 million on the MCC, which was construed as we were going to allow the CIA to come and divide our country into two. It was absurd. Right? So these are the same people, I must tell you to your face, people who point fingers are the same people who voted the Rajpaksas, because you didn't want to listen, because you got convinced by the rhetoric, the nationalist kind of speakers at the end. So, and if I'm not trying to defend myself and say we've been all good, but if you look at the Hansard and if you look at all the TV debates from 2019, from the day Gotabaya Rajapaksa reduced the revenues and lost 600 billion rupees a year, on that day we spoke out and said this is going to be the collapse of our country by doing this. Don't do it. Then as we went on, in the last 1.5 years, if you look at the last budget, we told Basil Rajapaksa, address the problem in this budget and you will avoid a default. You can put the country back at this time. They didn't listen. So 1.5 years, we did our duty. We went to talk shows, we told the country, we spoke to the country. But it fell on deaf ears. Right? Everything we predicted has happened. So we did our part. We can only work within a democratic framework. And you know that they have a 2/3 majority in parliament. We are just 56 members and we have to fight tooth and nail to get our messages across. So to that part, I think we've done part of our job.
But don't forget that it is change happens with only one. It may not be the brutal majority. Now people are on the roads. Now what is the message, having been in parliament for 28 years, you are going to give to Lanka, and the people are listening the worldwide also? And don't you think economic or other bilateral associations with countries is fine, welcome, but should you allow autocracy where there is no democracy that should inflict the minds of the people in the name of development or welfare?
Well, the 19th Amendment was what we put forward because we believed in democracy. We wanted to reduce the authoritative power, the dictatorial powers of one person, the president. We brought power back to Parliament because Parliament is more accountable to people. But the people gave the Rajapaksas the 2/3. The people on top of that allowed them to bring the 20th Amendment, whilst we voted against. So we've stood by our principles. And we've taken the right steps right along because we believe we brought in independent commissions. We wanted all the police commission, the judiciary, the public service, we wanted it to be independent. We did the right things, right? But it was not taken. What I'm trying to say is we still think we have failed. We have failed to communicate to the people what we stand up for. We failed to be more stronger in our position, maybe. So we believe that people are now going beyond party lines. And it's a time that political parties need to change. I think that we are going to shed our party lines and look at what the young people want. We are indeed looking for young leaders. And it's time that young leaders took over from us. This is the period that the transition should happen. So we have already started moving in that direction. And we think that Sri Lanka has weathered many economic storms, natural disasters, huge. We fought 2 wars in the north and in the south. We've never fallen into a mess like this. We've survived tsunamis. Therefore, Sri Lanka is resilient. We think united we stand, divided we fall. We think that we can come together. That is why we are trying to work, get the entire opposition united first. We are talking to all the opposition parties. There are many opposition parties. We are talking to them to come to a common stand and say, first step, ensure that the reform program goes through with IMF. So there should be stability for that and legitimacy. Those are two requirements for IMF program to go through. A legitimate government, a stable government. So we need to set the stage for that. Then we push for an election where the people's mandate will come. In that election, before that time, we want to put these proposals like what the people are asking, 19th Amendment, the abolition of the presidency, transparency, asset declaration of the MPs. We want to put all those into Parliament and get everybody to raise their hands. Then you would know who stands up for what the people think and who don't. So then you'll identify who you want and whom you don't.
When do you expect the Parliament will be in session, and what do you think? Is it family, dynasty, or the borrowings from such countries where there is no democracy, which you rate it high, is killing the spirit of democracy or living in Lanka?
Parliament will be sitting on the 19th, so that whole week. So we have, it's early, few more days, and we want to move all these resolutions on those days. We are also taking the request of the people for the president to resign, to step down, for the prime minister to step down, and to allow an interim government, where we will support that interim government in the opposition without any positions, but to push forward the reforms. And I think a multitude of issues are the cause. One is this family regime. Two is giving them undue powers, that is dictatorial powers through the presidential system, through the 20th Amendment. And perhaps he is the most powerful president anywhere in the world because he has so much power, but he has not been able to run our country. That shows that making one person powerful doesn't work. Two is this borrowing without accountability. You know, if you went to a multilateral agency, they would give you certain conditions to borrow. But going to certain countries and getting deals, getting dollar money coming in, because that kind of thing is corruption. When you take money like that, you can put up these huge projects which have no value to the country. But the only reason they go for projects like that is because people have big commissions. So that is the one actually that from 2009 onwards, the rate of borrowing up to 2014 was so high, and the projects that went through during the Rajapaksa regime has not given $1 return to our country. And that money, when we couldn't pay now, has caused this collapse. So this put together, we need to take out of the system and make a definite change. So I think people on the road, people on the streets actually have a good knowledge of economics now. They've all been able to study exactly what should be done. So I think that these problems have to be addressed one shot. There's not one, you can't address only one problem.
Yeah.
You can't just send the Rajapaksas home and then have another dictator there.
Yeah.
So the system has to change.
So you mean to say I'll be eagerly waiting for you to connect through the parliament session too. You can connect as and when you want what is happening in your parliament, and you can have number of parliamentarians also coming live on Dr. TSPR channel, so that the Sri Lanka and entire world will know. Before I say bye to you, this infrastructure development which every government across the globe is showing, big highways, big ports, big airports, don't you think they are all nothing but they will bring down the economy, spirit of democracy of any country? Is that lesson which every country should learn? It is because of the borrowings and those capitalistic minds, they are happy, and when you construct all these things, the politicians in power through commissions, they are happy. But is it not now the Lanka's experience that it is at the cost of people participatory constitutional democracy?
think now, Dr. Reddy, we move on to
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Omar Khan, if he's available.
Yeah,
Thank you, Kabir, for your input.
Wonderful.
And let's go to Omar now.
Yeah, Mr. Omar Khan.
Thank you. I'll be as succinct as I can. We got a lot of value, obviously, from what we just heard. Inspiration that we need to convert into discipline and into execution and into metrics and into deliverables. We tend sometimes, I'm American, but I'm a child of South Asia, to swoon in terms of rhetoric and then fall flat when it comes to basics. And some of our less articulate East Asian neighbors keep outdoing us in terms of results because their capacity to execute is so profound. I want to say just a couple of things. One is that we have been here in Sri Lanka a victim, and Sri Lanka is not the only country, of what I call magical thinking, which is that if I don't look at the problems, they'll somehow go away, or somebody else will solve them. And so we've had magical thinking from the beginning. When the current regime came in, though we already knew that we were in perilous straits financially in terms of revenue to GDP, in terms of repayments, the first act was to reduce taxes, which was a rather bizarre, first act. Then COVID, when it hit, Oxford University came up with a stringency index, which indicated different varietals of lockdown on a 9-point scale on 100 points. Sri Lanka had the most repressive at 86 points, exceeded finally by Palestine. So it seems, again, not only about harbors and cities in the wrong places, but where we need discipline and stringency, we don't apply it. In places where we mercifully had a very mild number of cases in the initial period, no real curve to flatten, we did one of the world's only 24/7 curfews, which economically, my economist friends tell me, in those first 2 months, added about $1 billion in terms of impact. Businesses failed, SMEs collapsed, banks had to weather shocks. We went on a rupee printing spree. Other countries have over this period as well, but the currency here is perhaps not as ubiquitous as the dollar or the euro. And so we cannot get away with just using the printing press. Magical thinking continued by raising private sector salaries over this period. We had magical thinking in terms of the fertilizer policy, which every expert in the field was opposed to, that overnight we were going to go, and this is overnight business, where we're going to do something immediately without preparation. My EU friends tell me that the countries for 20, 30 years that have been working on organic fertilizers may have hit 15 to 20% of the total use. But here, to save 220 million or whatever it was in importing fertilizers, we dealt body blows to industries like tea, which are in the many billions in terms of value and incalculable in terms of national heritage and otherwise. And that's not the only place. The farming community, body blows, shortages of all kinds. Then, even with the rupee float, we held the rupee artificially since about August 2019. But nobody suggested, and I think this question has been asked, what is the name of the person who decided in one day to just let it go after holding it that way, without any debt restructuring, without any preparation, without letting banks get ready, without letting businesses renegotiate terms? It basically destroyed the economy or accelerated a demolition job that was underway. And then not paying attention to the primacy of human capital. Peter Drucker, the grand old man of management, once said, the competition between countries will only be the competition in terms of their re-education of adults, on not just the education of children, which has been compromised through the pandemic handling and the choices made, some perhaps prudent, but others, it seems to be the one thing we close immediately is a school. Not enough attention paid, but not enough attention paid in terms of even adult re-education. So there is a magical thinking problem. I mean, if you take a look, one of our gold mines potentially is tourism in this country in terms of foreign exchange. Pre-COVID, Thailand had 39 million tourists per annum, Malaysia 26 million, Sri Lanka about 2 million. It doesn't take a raving genius to figure out there's exceptional opportunity there. But in order to do that, then we have to prioritize everything from ease of entry and departure to infrastructure. There are national sites in Sri Lanka among the most breathtakingly beautiful in the world. But just as a sidebar, you go there and there are 2 toilets in the whole place. And we have to be able to look at not only the poetry, but the prose by which we provide these opportunities. I believe that our communication skills, picking fights with the UNHRC, getting cantankerous, saying we don't need the IMF. This was repeated over and over again. We can do this with homespun solutions. And then, of course, it's rather abject when we have to go more with the beggar's cup out, where there's no shame in restructuring your debt. You have to, though, admit that that's what you need to do. So I think the absence of communication, when we go to the IMF, we'll have to negotiate. Some of their proposals may not work for us. So we need economists, we need pragmatists, we need people to help them taper their proposals to the realities of running this country in a way that it can be managed back into both stability and solvency. Let me say just 2 more things for the moment. I couldn't agree more about the vanity projects. I think they have not only been a source of bankruptcy and ruin, but they run the problem of all such projects. They may begin with wonderful intentions, but we need a metric. We need a 5-year payback. We need to know what benefit people are going to get out of it. And it would be fascinating if these projects could be cataloged and if we could sort of do an autopsy, or if they're still alive, not an autopsy, but just exhume the realities. Now, going forward, I'm going to tell you how one can add more time to what one has available. I see I won't be unfortunately here, I have to get on another call, but I see a distinguished person, Mr. Yusuf, who will be speaking here. He wrote a wonderful piece in the Daily FT, where I also write, suggesting the appointing of a commission answerable to Parliament, with commissioners given key tasks. And I'm not going to state that because why would I take up my time on something that he wrote about so eloquently? But what I'm doing is dropping him a little bit in the hot seat on there because I think it was a practical, marvelous idea. He has a solid legal foundation, and consider everything you say on that echoed by me as enthusiastically as you can if you share it. The way forward for me is we need to find a vision for Sri Lanka. You know, when everything is collapsing, people might say this is not the time for vision. This is the time for supervision. This is the time to get things sorted out. But it is vision that lifts people up. It's the only thing that ever has. From the time we were in the caves to when countries were collapsing, I'm American, my heritage is Pakistani. Sri Lanka is an adopted home. My father was ambassador to Japan. He wrote a book called Nation Building. The Japanese, who had been hit with 2 nuclear bombs, were humiliated, occupied, were probably the least likely candidate for being the world's 2nd largest economy for that period of time. And even today, the 3rd largest economy, with no natural resources and having to import everything. But in the 50s, Sony wrote a vision to make made in Japan synonymous with quality. Somebody referred to the Made in Lanka, I think, earlier. When they said that, it was preposterous. Made in Japan meant shoddy goods delivered late. And yet, by the 70s, when I was growing up, it was a fact. Lee Kuan Yew took a malarial swamp, and coming here to Sri Lanka in the 60s to experience his first escalator ride in the Selinko building, which shows you how quickly nations can rise and fall, determined that Singapore was going to be a first world nation. He had to deal with meritocracy, he had to reduce the cost of government, he had to put talented people, as has been suggested earlier, with clear educational scaffolding. And in the 1990s, their GDP was greater than that of Great Britain. So here's my proposal. Like John F. Kennedy's moonshot, when the Russians overtook them, and he said, we'll put a man on the moon safely in 10 years, at a time when that was considered ridiculous. I believe Sri Lanka should state a vision. Sri Lanka will be a first world country in 10 years. And watch the eruptions. As people say, that is the most idiotic thing you've ever heard. You can't buy bread, you don't have fuel. Well, it needs something that audacious, and then you build a national scorecard. You make sure it's not just bloviating empty rhetoric. You break it up into infrastructure, technology, governance, human capital, digital leadership. And then you can attract the best and the brightest. And then our narrative to the rest of the world is something purposeful. When you find a big enough why, you can always find a how. So I'll stop there and wish you a wonderful ongoing discussion.
Well, thank you.
Very
Thank you very
insightful.
much.
Very
Can we
insightful.
ask,
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
can we ask Sharika to talk now, please? Unfortunately, we lost Visakha because this is running late, but hopefully Sharika can.
Hi, am I audible? Yep. Okay. So I'm going to keep this very, very short because I think a lot of very salient points have been discussed. But I think one of the biggest points that needs to be addressed in terms of moving forward is that the entire system, the problem lies not within a single family or party or person. The family lies within a system that is corrupt and a culture that allows for such a system to thrive. So when people talk of 225 needing to be 225 going home, the sentiment itself is not constitutionally practicable and would leave our country in shambles. That's true, but the idea behind that is that the nature of politics in Sri Lanka is such that it's impossible to go forward or thrive or get into politics without being corrupt or bribed or subscribing to such a culture. And even if a person does not want to, one is forced to be silent while they see other people being corrupt. And I think in a political climate such as this, or in any climate, silence is compliance. And so the nature of our political system is such that corruption is inherent to it. People who are educated and people who are moral cannot come into power because it's impossible for them to maintain their ideas or their principles and continue to lead the country as well. And that is a fundamental failing of our country and its politics. And so as a way forward, it's important that that our country and our people be aware and educated about the people they vote in and how they get involved in politics, because there's a culture of political apathy and a culture of inheriting politics in Sri Lanka, in that people vote for whoever their family votes for, or their village or their district votes for. But I think increasingly there needs to be engagement with policies rather than the people who they're voting in, or short-term benefits, because there is also a culture of politicians buying, exploiting the government's failure to provide for people by giving vulnerable and poor people short-term benefits such as money or food in exchange for votes. So this idea of public accountability and understanding more deeply our political system is inherent and is essential for our country to move forward effectively. And that, I think, is centered on youth involvement as well. And I think we've seen that a lot in the protests these days. The fact that hundreds of thousands are gathered in this one place, in Galle Place, and not a single act of violence or aggression has broken out. And we've seen constant displays of unity and understanding amongst every single one of the protesters there. I think that is very symbolic and representative of the power that the youth have in terms of correcting generational mistakes. Because the situation that we're in right now, as Shanuki said, is not something that came up yesterday or day before. It's a problem that has been festering for decades and has been allowed to fester by the people who vote in those who are corrupt. So fundamentally, people need to educate themselves and need to be more aware. But also, what's very important is that there needs to be a separation of powers in terms of the judiciary, executive, and the legislative in power, because you cannot function as a democracy, you cannot function as a country that purports to be democratic if there is no separation of power, because that allows for people's rights to be infringed and there to be no accountability for it. And that also means that parties need to, there's the whole idea of one party might be better than the other, or people are, they campaign based on that. And these protests are definitely going to be a building ground for and they have been, for parties to put forward their ideologies and campaign for their future, for coming to power in the future. But the problem is we keep recycling the same people. We as citizens don't have a choice as to who we vote in, because the people who are in power are all the same people, and they're jumping party, they're jumping ship, but the people in power don't change, and that is a fundamental issue. There's enough criticism for any government. There were so many cases against the Rajapakshas that were supposedly brought up, in the last the last regime, essentially, but were swept under the rug immediately. So there's accountability on both sides that hasn't been, on all sides that hasn't come up. And I think that's what we as the youth are also fighting for. We're fighting for a fundamental systemic and cultural change, rather than, oh, this party is bad, that party is bad, this person is bad, that person is bad. So what we would like to see is experts guiding those who are in power, and those who are in power being experts themselves in their relevant fields, and being educated and being moral as well. And what I think is most important to move forward as a country is to understand that the people in power represent us as people, and we need to understand that we as the citizens, we as voters, have a responsibility to play in the current situation of this country. And I hope that this level of unity and this level of holding people accountable extends further than just getting the Prime Minister and President out of power or abolishing 20A. I hope it extends, as the youth especially, I hope it extends to generations worth of us creating systemic change, creating cultural change, such that those who are educated and those who are moral can come into power and can lead this country and lead this country into a brighter and more stable future. Because and I think that responsibility lies within the youth as well, because we need to give this country what it failed to give to us, which is a secure future and reliable leadership. And that's what I hope to see come from these protests. And that's what I hope to see as a way forward for this country. And I really hope that does come about. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarita. Can we ask Mr. Brito? Mr. Brito, are you still there?
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead,
Yes.
please.
Now, the only thing is, there is a mass, not a movement, but there's a mass standing on the street on one slogan. We all, the civil society, the government, and the opposition, being caught unaware until this came out. The only slogan is Gotha Go Home. No one knows who are the leaders, who is leading that, and their main thing is against the parliamentarians. They say that they are opposing all the 225 members of the parliament, even the parliament system. So, but anyway, without a leadership, a single issue, Gotha Go Home, has caught the support of thousands of people. Now I am a man who is working with the civil society since 1989. We also work with the issues and we try to coordinate the issue with the general issues, but we were not able to build up such a movement up to now. The civil society, after spending so much of money, supported by funds and everything, they couldn't do such a thing. So now, a group no one knows, leading, and people are supporting on their own. On their own, they are coming and supporting them. The problem is, the government is in trouble, the opposition is in trouble, the civil society, no one cares about. So the thing is, what will be the future? And now here also, there were so many proposals. There were so many suggestions how to overcome this. Now even in the civil society groups, there are so many discussions going on how to lead this or how to support this movement. But until now, no one could enter there. The political parties never go there. Now the JVP is in trouble because they were just, they were getting support, but now they also can't go there. So the people are fed up with the political system and rejecting everyone who is involved in the politics. So it's a dangerous thing. So the problem is, from here, how we are going to move forward. Because the country in a very bad situation. Now even today, the people on the Single New Year, they were waiting in the queues to get the petrol or the gas. So the country is in a very bad position. The political parties have been rejected, and this movement is there. But I think they also do not have a future plan how to solve these problems and everything. And the other thing is now what will be the government reaction? So government is still trying their best to be there. So because in the beginning we thought that under Gotabaya Rajapaksa, we will have some sort of a military rule in Sri Lanka, because he appointed many of the military rulers to the key post, and we all thought that he's leading to a military rule in Sri Lanka. And see, now not a single person from the political parties or from the civil society never had the guts to say Gotha Go Home, because with our experiences, we knew who Gotha is, and we all were afraid to say Gotha Go Home. The opposition said Sir fail. They said Sir fail, but they never said Gotha Go Home, because we knew if he ever said that, what will be returning? Because he, in his account, in Gotha's account, there are so many killings, even in 1989, even during the war, and so many disappearances in his account. So no one had the guts to say, Gotha go home. But these young people, without no one in the show as a leader, they say, Gotha go home. So what will be the reaction of the government? So now they are organizing the racist Buddhist monk. Now the Budubala Sena have issued a statement challenging. They want to start trouble and divide again the Muslims and the Buddhist people and the other nations, because Gotha came to power using the Easter bomb attack, saying that showing that national security is the most important thing. Now again, this government is trying to use the Budubala Sena, the racist Buddhist organization, to say that Muslims are trying to use this campaign to for their purposes like that. So I am worried because the struggle is going on. The people are supporting it, but no one knows how to connect these things with the political parties or the trade unions or the civil societies, but still it moves on. To end this, I'll just talk about our issue, the disappearances. Sri Lanka is the second largest number who reported to the UN Working Group on Disappearances. In 1989, there was disappearances in South. There was uprising by single youth, and then it was crushed. Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa, the present Prime Minister, who was the leader of that campaign during that time, he, on his own words, said 60,000 were disappeared from South or killed. Now, in the Northern War, the Bishop of Mana, in his statement, he said 147,660 odd people are unaccounted for. The people who entered the no-war zone area and who came out, the difference of that number, he said 147,660. So no one cares. So we got 30 years to get a permanent office of missing office of missing persons, to establish, to reveal the truth, a reparation commission. But not a single family or a victim was benefited from that. So there is no political will to do those things. Remember, every 20, 30 years, in every 20, 30 years, there's uprising and there's disappearances and killing and everything. So the thing is, I don't have any proposal. And I am unable to present this to the youth who are on the street. So we have to think how to tell them and how to be with them. That just putting up proposals and asking them to obey that won't do. So we have to think as much as possible how to keep this movement supported and to get the solutions for our problem. So thank you very much.
One question, sir. One question, sir. You mean to say Budubal Sena and all, again there will be this communal divide again, in spite of Sri Lanka being into crisis, such a deep-rooted crisis. Everyone is affected now. Every community is affected.
But still, it is the easiest thing to raise in the minds is the religion and the ethnicity. I don't think that they can do that as in 2019, because in 2019 it is the main thing in the South. That is why the South single majority support Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Now they are trying their best. I also do agree that they can't do it as in 2019 because of the economic crisis and everything, but still they are trying to use this Budubala Sena. And even about 3 days ago, the Buddhist monks started a march towards the gold face green, but it was stopped because they knew they couldn't come there. So the trade unions are still not joining this struggle. The political parties are being rejected. So the government, the only thing they can have is the racism, again starting trouble with the Buddhists and the Muslims and the Catholics. Even Catholics are being caught now because they were told, because of the Easter attack, the cardinal directly blamed this on the government. So very recently, 1.5 hours media, this thing was conducted by the defense secretary to say that the government, the Gotabaya and others are not involved in the East attack, because the Catholic Church is asking who the mastermind behind this Easter bomb attack. So after this struggle came out, because people say it is the curse of the Easter attack coming over the government. That is why this is happening. So they have to answer for that. 1.5 hours they were trying to explain.
Right.
But
so everyone has got their own say in this situation, Lankan crisis. I think Faisal ji, you want Gamika Gunawardhan, I think he has been sending his request that he wants to speak. Would you call him or?
I think Mas Yusuf first, maybe.
Yeah. Gamika,
Okay.
Gamika ji, can you speak after Mas Yusuf?
Hello. Yes. I'll speak very briefly since
He is naming Mas
his
Yusuf.
morning
Can you speak after Mas Yusuf so that you can take time? Not an issue. Gamika ji.
I can speak now, yes?
No,
You can hear me?
yeah, we can hear you, but Mas Yusuf is on the line. Don't you think you can speak after Mas Yusuf and you can take time also? You can take time and speak, not an issue. I'm going to be here till you speak out properly because the world is hearing you.
Okay.
Dr. Reddy, we also have Sunil R. Mas Yusuf,
Yeah.
Sunil R. and Dehan is also to speak. So if anybody can just speak quick.
Can I speak, please?
Yeah, Mas Yusuf, you speak. After that, Gamika ji will speak. Yeah, done.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we are hearing you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good evening to everybody. It's a late night.
Camera?
Yes, correct. After Ramadan. And I'll be just only sharing some bullet points due to time constraint. I have shared in the chat a link of an article that I wrote, which was referred to by Mr. Omar Khan, one of the panelists. Thank you very much, Omar Khan, for reading it and also for your appreciation of that, the content of the article. I appreciate it very much. I put the link there on the chat so that others also will be able to read the content of it. Because I put the link, I'll just only brush through very fast due to time constraint. The theme of the talk today is Lanka in crisis, way forward. I would like to just focus on that theme. Lanka in crisis, I would break down into 3 areas. One is financial crisis and a political crisis, and stemming from both of these, a social crisis, and finally, what is the way forward? So let me first deal with the financial crisis. Sri Lanka has a total debt of US dollars 51 billion. And Sri Lanka also has to service annually a debt to the extent of 4 to 5 billion US dollars up to 2026. And currently, the inflation rate is at 30%. The best way to exemplify this is a Sri Lankan who had 100 rupees in January 2022 was able to buy a pound of bread, which was 80 rupees at that time. Today, the same person who has the 100 rupees will not be able to buy a pound of bread for that 100 rupees. This depicts that 30% inflation. Now, all of this obviously was a cause of high debt accumulation. by the Sri Lankan regime due to economic stagnation, political corruption, financial mismanagement, and trade and budget deficits. This is the financial side of it. The political side of it is the politicians, the members of parliament were engaged in horse trading. They were negotiating deals with the parties, the governing party, etc. And they put their party interest or self-interest over and above national interest, over and above their responsibilities as representatives of those who voted them into parliament. All of this cumulatively affected the broad-based mass, and this caused the present social unrest. Now, this is the crisis. Now, let us look at the way forward. The way forward is one of financial management here, and second of good governance. As far as financial management is concerned, the government has decided, though late, to negotiate with the IMF, and that is a good sign. But IMF is not going to dole out money to the Sri Lankan government without conditions. In the rule book of IMF, there are three important areas. One is fiscal austerity, which means reducing government expenditure, stopping subsidies, increasing of taxes. All of these will affect further the populace. The second thing that the IMF would do is ask for structural adjustments, which would mean methods to improve trade deficits, competitiveness in the industries, raising prices of public service, etc. And finally, they would want privatization. There are many state-owned white elephants. The IMF would want those state institutions to be privatized. They would want liberalization of the market, and they would look for increased investments into the economy. Now, this is the IMF deal, and let's keep it at that because negotiations are going on. Then the next part of the solution is governance, in my view. And I have in my column that I had written, identified 11 areas that has to be addressed in order to overcome the current crisis, financial, political, and social. I will quickly run through that because I have shared the link, you all can read it. Number one is reducing powers of the president and transferring of power to the parliament. Number two, appointment of independent commissions better than what it was under the 19th Amendment. Number three, anti-corruption and anti-waste reforms, policies, and prosecutions. Number four, effective and strict checks and balances via parliament institutions. Number five, independence of the judiciary and strengthening of the rule of law. And number six, revisiting court cases where politicians and bureaucrats have been exonerated. Number 7, probing into the Easter Sunday attack. Number 8, tracing and recovery of misappropriated public wealth. Number 9, explore areas for prosecution of members of the present government and also the bureaucracy for wrong decision making, for negligent decision making, for nepotism, for corruption, and all of that. Number 10, amendment of the election laws, which will keep out much of the 225 current members out of the election scenario. And number 11, to develop a matured foreign policy so that our regional, bilateral, and global relationship would be respected and we could have a dignified foreign relationship with other countries. I will stop at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mars. Then Kamika, would you like to carry on? Thank you, Mars. I look forward to reading your article, Mars. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, you can hear me. Well, I'm actually falling asleep since I woke up very early, but I'll try to keep this brief. I think many speakers covered what I'm about to say, but there are some very important points which I'd like to stress. Firstly, the current economic crisis this country is facing is not limited to the actions of one or two political parties. If you study carefully, it is something, it is due to the gross mismanagement of the economy by the successive governments since the time of independence, not yesterday. If you look generally at the one of the most key economic indicators to determine the economic health of a country is the debt to GDP ratio. And the debt to GDP ratio has been averaging at 70% since the time of independence. So it's been going up and down, but mostly it's been staying just below 70%, and now it's at 110%. So that is far from a healthy economy. So from the time of independence, it's been grossly mismanaged by extremely incompetent people. So, for instance, one of the politicians who came online was very eager to justify their performance during that period. But I think their performance was as abysmal as the current administration. If you look at the amount that was borrowed during those 5 years, it amounted to more per annum than what the Rajapaksas borrowed. So I can't remember exactly what the foreign reserves were when they took it over from the Rajapaksas back in 2015, but what was left over had been 7 billion or so. But they had borrowed already 12 billion by issuing ISPs. So I'm not sure what it was when they took it over. So their performance was no better than the Rajapaksas. But to exacerbate and to accelerate this condition, one of the greatest contributing factors was the Rajapaksa regime's total misappropriation of development capital by investing in capital-intensive infrastructure projects, which is a complete waste, which didn't deliver any immediate economic benefit. And the other major issue which I want to stress is that most of these economic pundits and so-called academics, they just go on like a mantra, repeating and advocating to the government that go to the IMF, go to the IMF, go to the IMF. But sadly, these people have absolutely no idea of the actual workings of the IMF. They have absolutely no idea as to how these organizations are structured. They have absolutely no idea about the actual agenda of these organizations. The actual agenda of these major international bodies, such as the WHO, the IMF, the World Bank, they are all there to serve the interest of the majority funding partners, nothing more. Everything else is secondary. So they are not there for the interest of the developing countries such as us. Their only function is to serve the interest of the majority funding partners, which are the big economies, mostly to carry out the foreign policy agenda of America and the West, nothing more. So by getting into any kind of agreements with them, they're simply trying to gain leverage over us. That's their objective, not to really help us. If you think about all the bailouts our country has been accepting from them, it's 16 or so. So what is the actual meaning of a bailout? Bailout is, okay, you get bailed out. Is it because you need to get bailed out 2-3 years down the road? So their agenda is completely different to our interest. It's a complete conflict of interest. So if you know the inner workings of this organization, you would stay a mile away from them unless you have absolutely no other solution. The only reason you should go to the IMF is if your whole currency collapses and there's no other way out of it. So when the currency collapses, you have no other option available other than going to the IMF. Whereas until such time, you can strike bilateral agreements with various other countries, which is far more favorable for your economic well-being and your development. Now, if you look at some of the people who left the IMF and the World Bank, these are senior officials who have held very prominent positions. They are openly revealing to the world the workings of the IMF and the World Bank, how their predatory practices are literally strangulating many of these developing countries. And so I've covered that. And as far as this country is concerned, it's a systemic issue that we are facing. Even if somebody comes up and some of them, because both my uncles, my grand uncles, one is known as the father of socialism, and the other is known as the father of communism in this country, and they have contributed immensely to the well-being of society in this country and made great sacrifices. So after me being passive for so many years, I thought, time that I could do something. As for the solutions, nobody can come up. This point is actually coming up with a solution and handing it over to these people who are in the government or in an opposition party, because right now we're facing a constitutional dilemma, whereas most of the public have absolutely no confidence in any of these parties that are in power. They have zero confidence in any of these parties to do anything positive. Sadly, right now, if you look right across the board through various cross sections of society, most of the people have no confidence whatsoever left in any of these people. So I don't think any country in the world has faced this situation which we are facing right now, where usually when the public are dissatisfied and frustrated with the governing party, they normally opt for the opposition. But right now, they have no confidence in the opposition either, because they all know that this is just a game they've been playing with each other and having a kind of a memorandum of understanding with each other, not to make any of them accountable to their gross irregularity and gross misappropriation of public funds. And the other major issue in this country is there is no real effective system of oversight or accountability. Everybody just gets away with everything, and nobody is ever held accountable. So for any serious change to happen, a radical systemic transformation has to take place. And honestly, I have no idea how that can be done. But hopefully, we can work towards that to change the political culture of this country. Sadly, the political culture of this country changed for the worse soon after Mr. J.R. Jayawardana's introduction of the so-called open economy. Within a very short period of time, the rupee was devalued substantially, and they were heavily into importing more than exporting, and we've been having a trade deficit from day one, I believe, from the very early stages, soon after the British handed the country back over to the locals. So this thing has been going on from the beginning of independence. So it did not happen yesterday or during the last administration. But of course, things got worse in the last 10 years. So having said that, I do have a solution, but as I said, I'm talking with some of these people who still have some respect left. There's one handful of people in politics in this country who still command a semblance of respect from the public. Other than that, there's nobody else. So saying that, as I said, I do have a 3-month economic solution for the country, and I've told these people I'm talking to now, unless you come up with a credible team who's not going to rob the people anymore, I'm not going to share that with you. So having said that, I think I'll stop, and all the best to you, and thank you to all the contributors. It was lovely to hear Raniel Senanayaka's speech on how things can be changed, and all the gentlemen who contribute. Thanks very much, and have a good discussion for the rest of the day.
May I come in? May I intervene, please?
Go on.
May I come in?
Please.
Dr. Reddy, may I?
Yeah, please, sir. Please,
May
sir.
I talk now?
Please, sir. Please, sir. Please. Go ahead.
Thank you. On the IMF, with regard to the IMF, the greatest attraction to me going to IMF is that IMF never bargains for territory. Yeah. Now Sri Lanka had a very bad experience borrowing money outside IMF from China, and when we were unable to pay, they demanded some real estate from us, and we had to give a harbor and 15,000 acres of our land. Now that situation would never arise if we had gone to IMF. IMF never does that. See, so this is a tremendous attraction in going to IMF, and it's a dangerous thing to engage in bilateral borrowing. If a country has to borrow, I think the safest place to borrow from is the IMF. That's one reason. Because why the objective of IMF is to help a country to govern itself better, more efficiently, not to grab territory. IMF is not a money lender. IMF is not a money lender. It always helps countries to govern themselves more efficiently. And IMF, I can see, his record will show that even communist countries, socialist countries that shunned IMF, finally went back to IMF and rejoined IMF. And IMF has helped even countries, even Russia. And the IMF has helped Vietnam, another communist country. And today, as a result, Vietnam is on the road to becoming another Asian tiger. You see, that is because IMF helped Vietnam to strengthen its governance, its efficient, and make the government more efficient. You see, now if IMF, I'm sure Sri Lanka has gone to IMF, and IMF, I'm sure, will want the state-owned enterprises of Sri Lanka to be privatized. They're absolutely correct, no? Are these state-owned enterprises? We have to privatize. I gave the example In my brief 6 minutes, I couldn't expand on all this, but I gave the example. Even a strong economy, one of the strongest economies in the world today is India. Even India has privatized Indian Airlines. See, even India. What are we doing? We are a bankrupt economy. We are living on loan. Sri Lanka is living on loan, borrowed money, begging, and still we want to keep Sri Lankan Airlines going. So I think it is not fair to say that IMF is looking after the money to those who fund IMF. You see, that is I don't go along with that idea. The objective of IMF is primarily to help a country to improve the governance of a country. That's the primary objective. And all those reforms that the IMF is suggesting will be advising. I can expect what they will advise. You see, Sri Lanka needs them. Sri Lanka needs them. Strengthen our institutions.
Right, sir.
Ranjan, thank you very much. We have to move on to the next page. I'm sorry we don't have enough time. We're already very late. Can I ask Sunil Silva to come on, please?
Right, thank you. Thank you, Faisal. Thank you, Ranjan. And Dr. Siva Prasad and others. I have been listening to the others and I have been able to observe the ground situation in close quarters today, this afternoon, and till evening. And as far as the ground situation is concerned...
Share your camera, sir. Share your camera. So, Mr. Sunil, share your camera.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Share your camera. I've just sent you camera request.
Right, send it to me. Yes. As far as that is concerned, they demand one thing: an end to corruption and a systemic change. An end to corruption and a systemic change. And that movement is allegedly without leadership. That is what we are hearing others to say. But exactly not. It is exactly not. It's a leadership. It has specific leadership. The specific leadership is not one single individual, but a united force of youth who are united, who have shed their differences in terms of color, creed, caste, religion, and everything. But what we don't see here is what is the systemic change that they are demanding. We should be able, as professionals, to analyze the systemic change that they are demanding. For this purpose, in short, I would go back to the 1978 Constitution, which was adopted by the UN government then. Taking the example of Hong Kong, they introduced laissez-faire economics and open economic policy, and that then J.R. Jayawardena introduced that system of economic policy without the underlying law, that is the anti-corruption law of that particular country. No anti-corruption system at all was introduced. The constitution proposed several far-reaching changes in the structure of the government, particularly with regard to the judiciary. And with regard to the judiciary, it completely eroded the independence of the judiciary and the rule of law. What happened as a result is the interference with the judges and the operation of the legal system. Together with that, there was the witnessing of the economic system operating in tandem with the private sector. Up to 1978, the entirety of the economy was, the engine of economic growth was the public sector only. 1978 Constitution started the joint ventures with the private and public enterprises. Together, they were able to go ahead with corruption. I would say, being a lawyer, practicing for the last 42 years in all kinds of courts in this country, it paved the way for corruption. It is an open invitation to corruption. And IMF funds were given as loans to this country, while that measure was not addressed to, while that defect was not addressed to. And the anti-corruption laws that the country required has not been given even subsequently. And the UNP government ruled this country several times, about 4 or 5 times thereafter, every time with open arms for invitation to corruption. And what Mr. Kabir Hashim said in his speech, I don't agree. He said he is expecting a stable government and a non-corrupt government. It is impossible to achieve that. The reason is this: the system is open for corruption. The systemic change the youth are demanding today is the government, a system of governance without corruption. And the UNP came into power together with few other parties in 2015 as a good governance system. But then they could not carry it on. They were without the benefit of the anti-corruption laws. Anti-corruption laws that are enforced in the country currently does not favor a full system of anti-corruption agreed in the United Nations Convention, which Sri Lanka has signed in 2004 and ratified in 2005. And the anti-corruption system that I am talking about, which holds good for the country, which brings about a systemic change, is the anti-corruption system which allows the investigation of corruption and corrupt acts, either in the public sector or non-public sector. That includes all companies, individuals, state organizations, non-state organizations, and non-governmental organizations, and everything. And also, it includes a system whereby everything that a person possesses, unless he is able to account for how he came by those assets, to be confiscated to the benefit of the state. And also, the corruption system, anti-corruption system that I speak of today, is a system where you need not wait until the Corrupt Act is completed. The Corrupt Act is detected in the preparation stage, in the conduct of the person or the company. The manner of conducting its business is enough for the Corrupt Act to be completed and to be punishable. So it is, I want to finish up this saying that naturally, the man has a craving. The man's craving is controlled traditionally by religion, and in the modern day by civilized systems of law, a civilized legal system. A civilized legal system necessarily incorporates an anti-corruption system in the modern society. And in addition to that anti-corruption system, I propose green economic-based governance system too. Without the anti-corruption system, no political party can be relied upon. No political party is able to perform better, because Kabir Hashim said that the economy was mismanaged by the Rajapaksa government. In fact, the economy was mismanaged by the Kabir Hashim's government, and the current government, the Rajapaksa's government, did not do any management. They did not do any management. They did contracts only for the misappropriation of funds. So therefore, there is no management at all, no mismanagement, no management at all, but it's only doing contracts without anything. So they were able to swindle, they were able to misappropriate a lot of money out of the country. So my solution for a systemic change is an anti-corruption law which embraces all aspects which I have just described. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you very much.
Can I add a little to what Sunil said?
Ranjanji, I will invite you at the last, because all the other speakers also, let them complete, and you just keep those points listed with you. Before I say bye, I will make you to speak. You can sum it up. Yes, the others who are
just one point.
Others who would like to speak, finish it fast, so that I'll pass it on to Ranjanji. Who will speak next?
Dehan.
Yeah, please speak.
Let me unmute myself. Hi everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Just very privileged really to be representing the work that I do in this forum especially concerned with forestry and the creation of wealth. So I'm going to take an economic perspective. I'm talking to you today. I'm talking from the rurals in the Uva province, a village called Beragalat. And it's a mix of a personal story and something that we will be talking about in terms of economics. So the premise is that if we are talking about a system change, it has to come about by vision. And I'm very grateful for Omar, who brought up this vision, and working beside Dr. Senanayake, Dr. Raniel Senanayake, who spoke earlier. The vision for this country should be very clear, that the air should be pure, the water should be unlimited. These are the kind of ecosystem services that has made Sri Lanka a very wealthy nation. It has been romanticized for so long as Serendip, but as Serendip has become serendipitous today, that is because the consumerist agenda has failed, and there is no value being placed in an equitable manner across the landscape, which includes rural living and rural lifestyle. So as a young person who is unfortunately also not participating in any non-violent demonstration, but is actively participating in some work where restoration becomes a key premise of building our economy back and the creation of this wealth. So like I said, the consumerist agenda has failed, and the system change that people are looking for should become stabilized and represented in and evaluated in terms of the infrastructure of ecosystem services production. So these governments, they have put us in such a shamed position, building all this white elephant, infrastructure, and expecting all this magic to happen with very, very few tourists actually come here. Am I correct in assuming that 2.5 million as against 35 million who go to Thailand? So there is definitely opportunity, but we are not looking at ourselves and how we are going to progress into the future, because the land has degraded itself. We don't have food to eat. The air is not pure. The water is not clean. So this premise of how to develop a vision based on these objectives, and building an economic system, a green economic system, or whatever you may want to call it, these are all arbitrary to most of you, but in more than a singular way. We have actually established models, ground models, based at our research center and agrarian research center in the Uva province. So these are some of the things that I am able to discuss broadly and more specifically also, but not in this forum with this time. And I have already connected with a few of you in this forum with your emails, and also connected Dr. Senanayake, who's looking at evolving the economic structure. And yes, we can go to all these IMFs and World Banks, and we can talk about crediting or restructuring our payments in terms of ecosystem services production. And that's the premise of what I wanted to introduce myself to you and this forum through. So thank you very much for this time, and thanks Faisal, and thanks Dr. Tangale, and thank you Dr. Raniel and everyone for inspiring this work at this time, in this era, in this juncture in Sri Lanka.
I think we have come to the conclusion, I think.
May I come now? Come in now?
1 second, Ranjan. Yeah, Faisal ji. Anyone else left out before I pass it on to Mr. Ranjan?
I want to say a few words,
Yes, please.
Dr. Reddy.
Please, you speak.
With I think one of the lessons of this current fiasco is the fact that every government that has come from the last 20-25 years have been marginalizing our traditional fishers and our farmers, and have been talking about a services-based economy when 70% of our country is still rural-based, traditional people. Now, this urbanization project of the physical policy plan that has been published by the government, what we see now in today's scenario has completely and absolutely failed. So this urbanization project has to be thrown out of the window. And the government any government that comes in or tries to find a solution for us must first and foremost address the fact that traditional people want to live traditional lives. And if you carry on with the way you're going, any government, if we lose our fishers and our farmers, we will have no culture. Our entire culture is just going to go out of the window. I mean, in Udaipur, for example, you have one of the finest firewalking ceremonies in the whole of South Asia, better even than Kataragama, and the coals are walked by Tamil fishermen. If those guys are marginalized and sent into some mega city somewhere as slaves or laborers, what is going to happen to our culture? Every single festival we have in this country is based in fertility. Our culture is a very strong, ancient culture. We have more than 2,500 years at least of Buddhist culture. And are we really saying that 500 years of colonization has wrecked it completely? I'm sorry, I don't buy that. Our villagers used to be independent. Our villagers used to decide what they wanted to do. The king could give land to his favorites, and he could take them back, but he could never go into the village and touch the village's land. What is this government doing? This government is selling traditional land to Singapore in Uru-Alaska, which is where the first Vimukti Aragala took place in 1816 to 1818. When they killed every able-bodied man over 18, they cut down all the fruit trees, they burnt all the seed stock, they breached all the tanks, and they completely wiped out the Sinhala civilization that had existed for actually 5,000 years. On top of that all, they're also now going in and taking out the land away from the Raniel Ryanson, which land was given to them by President Premadasa for their safety, and which also land which has elephant parts in it, all sorts of different flora and fauna of vital importance to the country being cleared to grow sugarcane and corn. I mean, these are the complete idiocies that have transpired in this country. When we have had, this is why the Sajid Party, we are promoting the Gramaraj back to the village and accountability to the village, and please, we have to go back to the rule of Mahasamata, which is nothing less than telling people how to behave. We knew how to behave, we learned at the feet of our mother, and unfortunately, as a nation today, we have forgotten it. That's really all I want to add. Mr. Brigadier Ranjan, you can finish.
Yeah, Ranjan ji, I think I want you to sum it up. Please, Ranjan ji.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Doctor. The major reason, perhaps the main reason why the countries of Sri Lanka's economic collapsed, the main reason is corruption, in one word. What I say is dovetails to what Sunil said earlier. So a country like Ceylon, Sri Lanka, the way forward as of today is the formulation of a code of ethics for politics. It is absolutely essential for a country like Sri Lanka, taking into consideration what took place in the 74 years of independence. We need a code of ethics for politics in Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Wonderful. I think you are very short and sweet. The corruption, again, the scourge of the society. Yes, after watching what the Lankan guests are trying to put it across to the world. It is the corruption, mismanagement, misdeeds, and all the governments over, as being pointed out, whoever it is at the helm, some point of mismanagement happening, corruption happening, which they could not control. Even honestly, Mr. Kabir Hashim was also very categorical and very candid enough. Even during our governance, we could not control. That is a big statement coming from an opposition parliamentarian of 28 years experience. Let me again remind you, this is the Buddhist culture, and we always used to listen to Ceylon radio. Whenever, before this technological revolution, we always used to listen to Ceylon, Binaka. What happened to that wonderful culture? It used to come from Ceylon, the air, through air, the radio, and such a beautiful Buddhist culture, all Buddhists acts together, and having such ethnic minorities, linguistics, whether they are Tamilians, migrants from India, whether wonderful Muslim community you have seen how they are articulating, and then the Christian communities and all those other ethnic communities who are part and parcel of this great Lankan country. Like India, you always had unity in diversity. Same goes with India too. But what is happening now? What is happening now? When you have absolute majority, how is that you change from democracy to autocracy? Why should you need those powers to suppress your own people? In a democracy, you should allow people to speak, voice their concerns. And why should you need an absolute power? Because absolute power blinds the best. And that is what is happening, to leading to corruption. Why corruption? Because of short-sightedness, that only I should rule, my family should rule, my family controlled political party should rule, and in doing so, you are not allowing different divergent minds to come up and advise you on the welfare and development aspects, which keep on changing from one generation to another generation. Even this in particular generation, there are different IQs which are really happening, and we are very thankful. We should accept them. We should see that they all converge into decision making, whether it is welfare or development, and that decision making should be in a transparent and accountable way. And you make every citizen of the country part of such dialogue, so that these type of economical borrowings from different countries, or even IMF, I don't have any soft corner for that also. Any borrowing is a borrowing, and IMF is not having its own statutory fund. It is funded by many, you have seen, not IMF now, World Economic Forum, World Trade Organizations. They have taken over as they have infiltrated IMF philosophy. As you rightly said, IMF, International Monetary Fund, they will never ask for territories, as has been done with Singapore and China, reflecting the sovereignty of the country. Like Sri Lanka was put at stake just because of mindless borrowings. Even India is being warned now because of the Sri Lanka's happenings. Not those highways, airports, ports do not matter when you do not equate public participation. Public participation, that means the human resources. You have all those wonderful natural resources, then what should you do? Equate them with the human resources, and how it should be in a native way, not in a borrowed way. In a native way, all those occupations should be integrated. All those communities' occupations should be integrated, well knit, so that you will have a wonderful working economic model customized to your country specific, in that country, your provincial or district specific, so that that indigenous activity, that occupational activity of that particular region is not taken away in the name of the core economic satisfaction of those lenders. That means you are depriving yourself of your own identity and your cultural integrity. That is what holds any country together, and that is the beauty of a sovereign republic or whatever it is. When you allow that sovereignty to go away to the lenders, what will happen to the country? How can you expect any ruler can rule you. And as you rightly said, that cryptocurrency has become a big, big menace. Unlike Swiss banks now, you do not know who is the owner, phrase the resource, how these politicians and administrators, coupled with their own media, swindle away the resource, the natural resource or whatever it is, that belongs to every citizen of that country. And what happens? The Lankan crisis, which is the latest. Nepal, Somalia, Chile, you name it, everyone is there. I only hope this will be an eye-opener for all those countries who just depend on showing the development in the name of concretizing jungles at the cost of your environment, your own nature. You are giving away to the nature. You are destroying the nature. If you destroy the nature, the symbiosis, the life and nature should go together. If that is not happening, the utmost greed of a few, that 1% of the section of the society, will take over your nature, your life symbiosis, and that greed will destroy everything, your economy, your lifestyles, your traditions, your harmony with the nature. Why I tell you all these things is Sri Lanka having such wonderful coastline and such beautiful locales, it could have emerged as the world's topmost tourist destinations. And then with such ethnicity going, beautiful Sinhalese, beautiful Tamilians, Muslims, Christians, with that traditional Sri Lankan outlandish looks. What happened to that? Just in the name of development, you have destroyed the basic skills of every wonderful citizen Sri Lankan. This should be arrested, and we always feel political parties come and go. No political party, for that matter, no businessman should be allowed to go beyond the nation. Even in India, we condemn that when they say we are entering Forbes list. At what cost? The difference between haves and have-nots will rise to such a level, it will go to such a level that the country will start feeling, and then the opportunities are lost and only the wealthy survive. When such is the case, the country can never have that nitty-gritty to hold itself. Every time there will be some disturbance here or there, and we have seen in Sri Lanka the same is happening. And I only sincerely hope the government or the parliament which is going to be in session will deliberate on what went wrong, and they will be answerable to the people who are on the roads, mostly youth, irrespective of caste, creed, religion or political affiliations. When they are on the road, and I was made to hear that these demonstrations are very peaceful, and I would request everyone that these demonstrations should be peaceful, come whatever may, because it is our own country, it is our own infrastructure, and it is our own people. We should mind that you should not indulge in destructive activities. We should be, one point focus should be, how should Lanka come out of this? They have proposed many solutions: end corruption, ask the present government to resign, there should be an interim government, and first address what has happened with the economic front and how to bail out all those wonderful citizens of Sri Lanka out of their necessities. First, they should be provided with basic necessities to survive. Health, big issue then. Good food, health, and then you need to have minimum things like to travel, the transport activity going on, so that people can work, they can make some money, and also you can have every other tourist aspects in place so that people from different parts of the world start visiting, so that you will get revenue multifold. And believe me, by not following a proper fiscal discipline, a proper economic agenda, if you go on privatizing all public sector units as being done in India too, we are against it. If a private company wants to come in, let private company create such type of public sector unit, that entity, but not taking over the existing public sector unity in the name of stating that they are into losses. This public sector unity already have infrastructure and many human resources, and they have got a policy in place. How can a private company just come and invest and go? If that is the case, how is that private company not trying to establish such type of entities? And who is managing public sector units? Is it not the government and their own trade unions and those untroubled handling of the things in between? The administration is put to sword because of mishandling by the government. So you should be careful. Don't let your native units or your native public sector units or anything to go to the private sectors or IMF or whoever it is, as they have done to Singapore and China, giving away the territories. You should not be doing that. It is a warning for everyone. And believe me, I'll be hosting regularly this series. I'm thankful to Faisal Mansoor for coordinating and cooperating, having such wonderful people on the show. And we are allowing the people of Lanka to come out and speak so that the entire world listens to them, and even the people of Lanka also listen to that. Even the rulers also listen to that, so that a solution, a proper solution wherein people participatory constitutional democracy prevails, so that every citizen in Sri Lanka can lead a happy and comfortable life, having a stable and able government which only works in the interest of people in a transparent and accountable way. And mind you, it should be democracy, not autocracy. And don't give absolute power, it will blind it the best. Thank you, Mr. Faisal Mansoor and all. The same link will hold good for you. You can have this link and you can download, you can share it across the globe. We have nothing against that, because this needs to be shared.
Just wanted to,
Yes, Faisal
I
Mansoor.
just want to thank Dr. Akurogada, Kabir, Ranjan, Sunil, and Satanda for staying on for so long. And I'm very, I'm glad that everybody stayed on. And so good night and thanks.
Yeah, for all.
Thank you, Faisal. Thank you, Dr. Shiva.
Do support
Thank you,
Dr.
everybody.
TSPR channels. For all the Indians, we say Sukhanidra Shubharatri, including for all the Sri Lankans, we say Sukhanidra Shubharatri. For the world over, we say good afternoon. I should say, because it is already late. I cannot relate it to good morning in America and everywhere. Still, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Tomorrow, we are coming up with a very good health vaccine eye-opener. So stay tuned. See you. Bye from now.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shiva. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you very much.